The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, April 21st, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Paolo Gerbaudo, sociologist and author of The Great Recoil, Politics After Populism and the Pandemic. Meanwhile, the Russian military has conducted an intercontinental, always have a hard time saying that, ballistic missile test with the potential to carry a nuclear warhead, an attempt to show strength as its brutal war in Ukraine rages on. However, in good news, after the new CDC guidance indicated so, the Biden administration is appealing the Trump-appointed judge's ruling that overturned the mask mandate on planes, trains, and other transportation. Happy to see that. A memo that was leaked to the press says Bernie Sanders has not ruled out a 2024 presidential run if Biden does not run for a second term. Intrigue. And new reporting sheds light on how Republicans reacted in the immediate aftermath of January 6th. McConnell reportedly wanted Trump impeached, and Kevin McCarthy planned on telling Trump to resign. But after a few days, some temperature checking of the base happened.
So Kevin's a wimp. He could never have done that in his wildest dreams.
Little Kevin.
So you stuttering, Kev?
Israel's attack on Gaza continues. For a second night, Israel warplanes bombed the Gaza Strip, the most intense string of violence that we've seen since last year's 11-day assault on occupied Palestine. They also conducted a brutal crackdown of the Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan, once again. And lastly, thousands have fled Arizona and other parts of the Southwest as wildfires rage. The fires swelled to nearly 20,000 acres yesterday. The springtime wildfires in this area will only increase in size, length, and intensity as climate change continues to dry the area. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. A reminder, because I've been seeing some chatter about if I've fully taken over the show and where Sam is. If you just tune in, on random days, you might not know. Last week, Sam had COVID. This week, he's recovering, but had a pre-planned vacation. So we will have Sam back next week, God willing.
The triumphant return on Monday. Yep.
Yeah. Just some notes on that, making sure everybody understands. Sam will be back. It's not a permanent takeover by myself. But if you want to see us in person, please go and get those final tickets for the big live in Boston at the Wilbur Theater on May 15th. There are not many left. Check them out, folks. The big live, as we've been calling it. But first I want to highlight this story because we had a viewer write in about this, a listener of the program IM'd us about this story of Melissa Lucio. So I'd heard about this in passing, but didn't fully know the details of it and wanted to make sure that the audience was aware of it. People are pleading for Texas to stay the execution of a woman named Melissa Lucio, who says she was wrongfully convicted of killing her toddler, Mariah, in 2007. And it appears, based on the reporting, that it's quite clear that she did not mean to do this. The Innocence Project is working on her behalf, and you'll see when you hear the evidence. And not that she didn't just not mean to do it. The evidence seems to be growing that she had nothing to do with the death of this toddler. I'm going to read from a Guardian piece. On the evening of the 15th of February 2007, a team of 5 police officers in Cameron County, Texas, began an interrogation of a Mexican-American mother whom they suspected of having murdered her 2-year-old child. Melissa Lucio was in a vulnerable condition. She was pregnant with twins and in the grip of shock and grief. Just 2 hours earlier, her youngest child, Mariah, had been pronounced dead, having fallen unconscious. The officers did not let the suspect's vulnerabilities get in the way of the inquisition. Over almost 6 hours, stretching late into the night, they applied to Lucio the notorious Reed technique, a controversial interrogation method that has led to numerous wrongful convictions in the U.S. As trained to do under the system, the officers put their faces within inches of Lucio's, screaming at her that she had to know what happened to her child. They had lots of evidence. She was to blame for the death, they said, forcing her to view photographs of the girl's lifeless body. Then, as the Reed method dictates, they abruptly switched tone. They gently reassured her that she could, quote, put this to rest if she would only confess to having caused the toddler's death. Lucio insisted over 100 times that night that she was innocent. But after more than 5 hours of aggressive maximization and minimization, as the technique is known, she reached a break point. She began to repeat the phrases that the investigators had effectively coached her to say. I don't know what you want me to say, she told them. I'm responsible for it. I guess I did it. That coerced confession was the core evidence presented at Lucio's subsequent trial. It was critical to the jury's guilty verdict and to the death sentence that followed. Abolish the death penalty in general, because there are a lot of cases like this, by the way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the death penalty question is one of, I think that's it's a purity test of your basic seriousness. If you believe in the death penalty, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you haven't thought of it deeply. If you have thought about it deeply and come to that conclusion, I'm going to take you for a political enemy. But it's bad in a generic sense when you don't have this sort of law enforcement abuse of like a coerced confession like that. But knowing that we do have these sorts of abuses, like it's
indefensible.
unbelievable that we would allow like these sorts of agents to take people's lives.
Even in, say you were able to guarantee that everyone who got the death penalty was guilty of their crime, it's a wrong position. It's impossible to guarantee it. In fact, we know that there's a very significant likelihood that the person being put to death is innocent. And it seems like in this case, the Guardian continues, a mounting body of evidence, which much of it never heard at trial, some of it actively suppressed by prosecutors, points to a very different conclusion. Mariah was not beaten to death by her mother. She died of internal injuries from an accidental fall. And now Republicans are calling for a stay on her execution too in the state of Texas. This is such an egregious case that it's not just the Innocence Project. It's not just leftists or Democrats. Her execution is set to happen on Wednesday. So time is of the essence here. Hundreds of religious bodies, along with women's and domestic violence advocacy groups, have joined celebrities such as Kim Kardashian to plead with the Republican governor, Greg Abbott, and the state's Board of Pardons to intervene. Lastly, just another piece of evidence. As Lucio was being interrogated by Cameron County detectives in a separate room in the police station, some of her other children were also being questioned. They told investigators that their mother had never been abusive or violent in any way. The children also said that 2 days before Mariah died, they had seen their siblings accidentally fall down a steep flight of stairs on the outside of the house they were renting. Lucio, who was busy getting the children ready for school, found the girl at the bottom of the stairs crying. So that's what they believe the injuries were attributed to. And you can read more of this Guardian piece to show how the medical examiner presented false testimony that was taken seriously at the trial. One of the Texas Rangers also testimony that was false, etc. So, especially to Matt's point, you're unserious if you have thought anything about politics and still support the death penalty, because one, it's a position that cannot be defended by morality or by the outcomes and the incentives that it's supposed to create. It's really just brute vengeance at its core and brutality, but also it relies on a complete lack of knowledge or ignorance about police work and the incentives that police officers have to rush to conclusions about cases regardless of the humanity of the person that they're locking up and potentially sentencing to death, and the prosecutor pursued that in this case.
Yeah,
So
and that technique, the read technique, what you mentioned, like it's just disgusting that you deploy that on a grieving mother, as opposed to how many rape kits are unprocessed at that police department?
right.
Probably tons and tons. Like you want to you protect people, go protect people.
But before we get too depressed by that story, I just wanted to highlight it because next Wednesday, as I mentioned, is the deadline for this execution to be stayed. We'll have a little bit of fun before we are joined by Paolo Gerbaudo. Donald Trump sat down with Piers Morgan, a very unlikely journalist to be pressing Trump on this. But I mean, he's after the January 6th insurrection attempt, Piers Morgan was open about saying this is insane, ridiculous. He's a right winger, but he's a little bit more steeped in reality than, say, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So he was able to get this interview with Trump, and he tried to pin him down on the question of whether or not the election was rigged, stolen, etc., or not, which is completely manufactured by Trump in order to preserve his own ego, but has been eaten up by his followers. Here's the trailer for that interview. It is arguably the sweatiest Trump has ever looked. It seems to have been edited together by Michael Bay with a lot of smash cuts and dramatic music. And apparently, Trump walked out of this interview. Let's take a look.
Okay, Piers, I'm ready.
A former president in denial.
I'll be completely straight with you to your face.
I think I'm a very honest man. Much more honest than you, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
It was a free and fair match. You lost.
Only a fool would think
You
that.
think I'm a fool?
I do now, yeah.
With
Excuse me.
Okay, with respect,
The
you haven't
legislature-
produced the hard evidence.
Excuse me.
The most explosive interview of the year.
I don't think you're real.
I really don't- I don't like
very
I
dishonest.
just-
Let's finish up the interview.
Morgan versus
Turn the
Trump.
camera up. Very dishonest.
Turn the camera. Very dishonest. I'm excited for that.
I think you're fake. I just like the idea that Trump is finally going to be pressed by a journalist about the big lie. And, I don't trust that it's Piers Morgan doing it because I think he's personally objectionable and I don't trust his sort of reporting. But that said, it looks like it did enough to piss Trump off there.
Yeah, but the point is right. Like,
what's the evidence? I got the evidence right here. We're going to deploy it at Trump's desk 2024.org.
Excuse me, and the interview now. I'm pretty pumped about that. It's the perfect way to get like a guy like Trump to agree. You have to get him to agree to the interview first. Piers Morgan is perhaps the only One American News Network, Newsmax, or Fox host. The only person maybe outside of those three networks that can get Trump to, or some random evangelical station that he'll call into while taking a dump. But I mean, regardless,
as far as journalists that will ask him about that,
that's the best we're gonna get. And probably the only journalist that he's spoken to in recent times that hasn't ate up his BS election fraud stuff. So look, he walked into the bear trap, and we're all gonna have some fun with that, I think.
I wonder if this is part of the DeSantis formation. If this is trying to like sink our boy Donnie and put the establishment DeSantis in there. I'm curious how this is going to play out.
Yeah, maybe we'll finally see that spray tan melt off his face in the middle of the interview.
If he lost to DeSantis in a primary, that'd be very
I can't see it still. I can't see it.
Neither can I. That's why it'd be so insane.
Yeah.
You might have to, like, I don't know, disappear forever.
Commit seppuku or whatever. It's the end.
Honorable thing.
I hand it off to you. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. But first, 420 was yesterday. but the sale for Sunset Lake C to the B to the D. Oh, hell yeah. It's still ongoing. 40% off smokables like hemp flower, pre-rolls, and keef, and 30% off everything else. There is no promo code needed. Products are already discounted on the website. I mentioned earlier in this story about Melissa Lucio, the Innocence Project, working on her behalf. This is a great organization that does wonderful work like this. And Sunset Lake and Majority Report are teaming up to turn everyone's favorite stoner holiday into a fundraising opportunity for the Innocence Project. They're working to undo the damage of the war on drugs. Here's how it works. Visit sunsetlakecbd.com. Starting Wednesday, April 13th, Sunset Lake CBD will be offering 40% off smokables like hemp flower, pre-rolls, and keef, and every other product will be 30% off. I use the tincture every night, pretty much. I mentioned that, but I want to start using the keef and the smalls a little bit more too. So that will be up next, and maybe I will be using this discount. Sunset Lake will donate 4.20% of sales to the Innocence Project, a nonprofit organization that works to free the innocent, prevent wrongful convictions, and create fair, compassionate, and equitable systems of justice for everyone. Sunset Lake is a majority employee-owned business that donated more than $26,000 last year to anti-drug war organizations, animal shelters, union strike funds, nature conservation, food shelves, and refugee resettlement organizations. They walk the walk, ladies and gentlemen. Sunset Lake is a company that has ethical business practices, and we're proud to partner with them. Again, visit Sunset Lake C, then B, then D.com to take advantage of these discounts and help Majority Report raise money for a great organization. The sale ends April 24th, right before midnight. Don't miss it. You don't want to miss out on this sale, folks. And it's a great product. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will be joined by Paolo Gerbaudo, sociologist and author of The Great Recoil, Politics After Populism and the Pandemic. We are back, and we now are joined by Paolo Gerbaudo, sociologist and author of The Great Recoil, Politics After Populism and the Pandemic. Paolo, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Emma.
So, The Great Recoil, let's just start with that phrase. What does that mean?
It means that many things that we took for granted over the last decades should not be taken for granted anymore. We got used to things happening that were unthinkable, right? The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, now the ever more present effects of climate change. And all of these unexpected things are the recoil of the failure of globalization, the way in which globalization has opened new risks and dangers that the market cannot solve, and that only state interventionism can address.
So your position is that the pandemic laid bare the stakes of continuing down the path of neoliberalism, of globalization. But who did the pandemic laid down the stakes for? I mean, you saw Biden sort of adopt some of this rhetoric, right? We're not going to cut the social safety net to a degree. We're going to attempt to add to it, but Build Back Better failed, right? So it seems like there's an understanding among the regular population that this economic system of globalization and neoliberalism is failing, but the ruling elites are still behind the 8 ball a little bit. Or behind the ball.
It is a global trend, right? I mean, in China, they are talking about a dual circulation system. They don't want to be the factory of the world anymore. They want to concentrate more on domestic production, on more high-end goods, high-tech goods, technology, even AI. They want security in energy and food, while engaging still with a global market. There are some countries that are rethinking their relationship with globalization, realizing that they want to protect parts of their economy. Part of this also seemed to be the spirit of Bidenomics initially, in a sense, like creating a more protected sector for the national economy, in a way, increasing standards for workers after years and years of race to the bottom. But we also saw that there are very big opponents to this strategy, because there are interests that don't want this to happen. I mean, Kirsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, right, in Congress. And trust me, there's Kirsten Sinemas and Joe Manchins all over the world, in Italy, in Britain, in many other countries that are very fiercely resisting this change because many people have something to lose from this.
So basically, they are the firewall against capital, or for on behalf of capital, and there are people around the globe that represent that in the same way. But eventually, hopefully, the hope is, I guess, and I found your thesis to be a bit more hopeful than some of the others that I've seen. Is that kind of politics can eventually be cracked because a new consensus is being reached?
Yes, I mean, my optimism is limited, I have to admit, but it has to do with the fact that some of the most short-sighted dogmas of free market economics and the so-called free market society are being abandoned. They are actually being abandoned also by sections of capital itself because they are untenable. Right? I mean, it is now evident that you cannot count anymore on a stable global market and whatever, locate your production anywhere in the world as if there are no risks of geopolitical instability around, for example. Right? But this doesn't mean that we are being delivered from neoliberalism and somehow automatically led to something nice, to whatever, social democracy, let alone socialism or whatever, eco-socialism. Rather, my thesis is that we are moving to a different battlefield that is different from the battlefield we were used to over the last 40 years, where both the center-left and the center-right, to a great extent, had to accept that what was at stake was what kind of management we should develop for the market economy, how we should manage the market. There were more compassionate ways and more cruel ways of managing the market, but there was an acceptance that that was what politics revolved around. Now, instead, the key political question has changed. It has to do with what mission the post-pandemic state or the post-global state should have. And there are very different narratives coming from the right and from the left, which have to do with different politics of protection, with different ideas of what the state should protect.
So I wanted to get into that, right? How the right presents protection of certain cultures, and the left is about protecting institutions of social safety net, adding to them to an extent, but also protecting the environment, for example. Can you build on that, the dichotomy and the different presentations of protection from each, from the right and the left?
I found writing this book, Protection, as a very revealing concept because I discovered that it was something very profoundly rooted in political philosophy, like in the Western political philosophy from Plato onwards. Many of the classic authors that people are supposed to read in college, right, or in high school, actually always insisted that politics fundamentally has to do with protection, because protection is the minimum condition for society to continue. Like if you don't protect society vis-a-vis many dangers, natural or otherwise, society will simply disappear. Yet this idea of politics as protection, in a way, disappeared during the neoliberal era because it was felt to be too oriented to the collective, too paternalistic, whatever, authoritarian.
Keynesian. Yeah.
Exactly, Keynesian. But now you instead clearly have a situation where fragility, vulnerability, exposure to risks is a major issue on the agenda. But for the right, the risks are mainly migrants that indigenous workers, they consider want to be protected against, and property. I mean, property that wants to be protected against redistributive demands, people asking, tax the rich, redistribute money, and so on and so forth. For the left, instead, it has to do with realizing that unless we protect the human habitat, it's not anymore the habitat of polar bears. It is our own habitat. Like our society is going to see a deterioration of living conditions, and that also we not need to reclaim security as social security, right? Which was a key slogan of the Labour in the UK, like of the New Deal, of Social Democrats in Sweden and other countries. The Swedish Social Democrats had this beautiful phrase: secure people there. Only if you provide people with security, with some stability, people can thrive and can develop all their skills and all their ambitions.
So this is in a sense, a reclamation of big government, or you describe it as neo-statism. What do you mean by that?
I mean, what I mean by that is a very broad and still rather amorphous consensus that is taking shape, and which has to do with this simple affirmation of we need more state intervention, which inverts the worldview of neoliberalism, which both in its neocon form and its more progressive form was always about let's roll back the state, like small government, Clinton, we want to reduce the power of government, Thatcher and Reagan, and so on and so forth. So there is a broad realization that we need the state back, and that the state, this is very important, should not just intervene in order to correct market failures, should not just be there to bail out the private sector when the private sector fails, but should take a more proactive and mission-oriented approach, as economist Mariana Mazzucato puts it. In a sense, it should identify area where it wants to deliver public goods that have no other justification than the good of society, that have no market justification, but have a social justification. Think about the environment, think about education, health, but also economic sectors that may not be best suited for the private sector.
And how is that? You talk about the politics of protection, which I think is a distinction. But how else does that differ from, say, the Keynesian model of when the New Deal came out, which I know was designed to beat back fascism? Is this characterized by beating back something a bit different?
Yeah, it has to beat back right-wing populism.
Right.
That is fed on a sense of widespread anxiety, neglect, betrayal, and turning into resentment. Neoliberal policies have created a support base for very dangerous movements. So one of the greatest risks of neoliberalism is political. Neoliberalism has created the conditions for a possible authoritarian turn. But it is also a politics that has to do with facing conditions that are partly similar, as you were saying, to the New Deal or European social democracy, but that are very peculiar and specific to our historical time, right? Where we face a major historical challenge dealing with climate change, which doesn't necessarily have to be something catastrophic, as sometimes climate activists portray, but can also be a positive opportunity for society to reconsider its basic mechanisms, its way of functioning.
My producer Matt wrote in and wanted me to ask you this. I hope I characterized his question accurately, or maybe Matt, you could just say this into the mic.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like in a time where you expect the state to be more active, how do you feel about the prospects for democracy and like human input into those decisions? Do you see, and especially globally, like here things look pretty dire as far as attempts to roll back voting rights. I'm curious what your perspective is on that.
That is very important. Whenever the state power increases, democracy has to increase proportionately. Right? Otherwise, you can end up with an authoritarian statism, which is controlled not by democracy, but by technocracy. So in fact, control which is another key term that I discuss in the book, is a key issue on the left in terms of recuperation of democratic control. I mean, if you look at social movements over the last 10 years, they have constantly voiced this demand of reconstructing channels to convey the popular will, to monitor representatives, to create a more stable link with representatives, and to avoid the situation of Democrats in name only, right? Or like these politicians that have no connection, no responsibility anymore to their electorate. So that is definitely a very urgent issue to avoid that statism goes in an authoritarian direction.
Can you talk a bit about the concept of how globalization pushed outward, and now something like the pandemic, the shock to the system, which I think just accelerated a lot of the devolution that we saw post 2008 and the economic collapse there, right? It was more of a it forced people to speed up to the understanding that this is a failed system. That now we're seeing more, as you write about in your book, of an inward focus, and that is something that is mirrored globally, and not just in the United States. We can see it around the world.
In a way, this is common to many phases of capitalism, right? These long waves, these K waves, as they were described, that last for 40, 50 years. You have this moment of expansion. It tends to be a moment of international integration. You had a similar phase, a similar globalization at the beginning of the 20th century before the two world wars. And though this globalization was the most intense, the most pervasive, the most far-reaching, it really kind of subsumed virtually the entire world economy under the same market and under the same financial market. And it was very much premised on this narrative of flat earth, open spaces, break all barriers, break all ties, red tapes, and so on and so forth. As you could see in this jargon, right? This jargon of externalization, outsourcing, outcontracting, offshoring. Let's go out, right? This was the imperative, like let's go out in the open. Yet, in a way, that also damage the very support structures of society that allow the market to operate. Because the market doesn't operate in a void. The market operates thanks to the existence of social structures and of social infrastructures. And now we are realizing how much many of these structures have been eroded under neoliberalism and how they need to be reconstructed. How we need a process of recentering, of recovering, of repairing and rescuing, like to use some of the slogans used also by Biden's government, because without this institutional architecture of the state, ultimately, also the economy doesn't work. I mean, you could see that during the pandemic with hospitals. I mean, ultimately, a country that doesn't have an efficient public health sector suffers also economically. It is not anymore internationally competitive. And the same goes for a country that has rusty bridges, that has roads that are not working, or doesn't have high-speed train system as the US.
How does that play into narratives and the mood around the establishment and protection, to use your word, of sovereignty? Because we're talking about contracting inward, more of a focus, as opposed to these larger, more free-flowing openness narratives that seem both reflective in the pre-World War era and also reflective in the pre-pandemic, pre-economic collapse era. Or more pre-pandemic, frankly.
I mean, I think that what is at stake is not, I would just say, a complete bounce back to something that is entirely the opposite of globalization, right? In a sense that nobody wants to go to an autarkic condition, say, for example. Like, not even North Korea, sometimes described as the hermit state, is really autarkic. Instead, in fact, it exists only thanks to trade with China and support from China. I think that the key issue here is, realizing that sovereignty means a very simple thing. In a way, it is a fancy word to say supremacy. And supremacy can mean many different things. Obviously, on the right, it is suprematism. It is this enter here your own people's name first, America first, Italy first, as Salvini in Italy used it. Like this idea that my country comes first, my country comes before anything else. But it can also mean more generally the supremacy of politics over economics. And on the left, it means popular sovereignty as the supremacy of the popular will, of the will of the majority, right, of the will of everyone virtually, vis-a-vis the private interest, the particular interest of corporations, of lobbies, and people like Kirsten Sinema and Jumanji. So in that sense, sovereignty is actually it is a fundamental democratic principle, right? The fact that the will of the majority, the will of the people comes before private interest.
And how are some of these concepts distinct from populism, or the populism that we saw in the 2010s? Which would you characterize that as more of a initial heated reaction to the end of neoliberalism, and now we're in a different era than the one of, say, even the Sanders movement of 2016 and the Trump movement of 2016 as well?
Yes, exactly. In a way, the 2010s was the more virulent moment of realization that something was profoundly wrong with the way the world was organized. And there were these bursts of mobilization on the left and the right, but it was not very clear what these movements wanted to propose, what was their positive content. In a way, it was more of a moment that revolved around a new form of politics having to do with effective, charismatic mobilization, with leaders, be they Donald Trump on the right or Bernie Sanders on the left. While now a number of circumstances and the very clear perception of evil and of a negative reality and negative challenges in reality that confront us, we are compelled to reflect more about content as well, about the substance of politics, about the issues that confront us, and to develop more long-term strategies. So that is why we are moving from populism to neo-statism. So in that sense, you can look at the populist moment of the 2010s more as a moment of reorganization and gestation of new political actors, right? That are now taking a more clear shape, a more recognizable shape.
But do you think that the Sanders movement was more of a, despite having some of those same characteristics of virulence or anger, that was a movement centered around a substantive shift in politics, which I think is distinct?
Yes, definitely. I'm not saying that those movements did not have a platform, did not have an issue, but that some of the policies that have been developed in recent years, in a way, we started, say, with Occupy Wall Street, and I've been kind of really following closely all these wave of movements. I remember those days, and people were in a very embryonic phase where they had a very clear sense of what was wrong, but they had not yet a clear sense of what the possible solutions were. So progressively, this critique, this denunciation of the problems was accompanied by solutions, by new policies. And only now, in a way, these policies are not only individual policies, but they are coming together in something akin to a platform, in something akin to kind of like really structured vision of the good society, like reclaiming an idea of the good society or what we want to build for the future. So in a way, it is the same actors that were populists in the 2010s are now becoming neo-statist as they're focusing more on contents. I mean, also kind of like Bernie Sanders is taking states' responsibilities now, like in Congress. Yolanda Diaz, leader of the Spanish left, is now focusing very much on policy. For example, she now approved this very important labor reform that makes permanent contract the default form of contract. So to me, it's just in a way a shift in emphasis, really, in a way in which politics operates.
I agree with you. I'm a bit discouraged by the left neo-statism not gaining a foothold to the same degree that, say, we're looking at the French election, for example. I mean, yes, there were gains made by Mélenchon in that election, but now there's a fight between the very seemingly archaic politics of Emmanuel Macron and a racist populist of the era. Even previously, there's maybe you would characterize it differently. If you think Le Pen has embraced more new statism, you would say that that's the case.
Definitely. I mean, her campaign poster was Femme d'État, which means stateswoman. That was the entire slogan, right? And that very much condenses her discursive strategy, not just now in these elections, but for many years now, that has to do with the normalization of her figure and a normalization of Rassemblement National, previously called Front National, shedding some of the encumbering kind of populist robes that they were carrying on from the 2010s, but also from before, and presenting herself in a way as a safe pair of hands, promising the public that she will not constitute a danger, say, for the stability and security of France.
Are there some policies in particular and priorities given these dynamics that either here in the United States or abroad that the left should be emphasizing?
I think the problem with Bidenomics is that what it is a credit card state, right? It is a spending state. Rather generous, but rather generous ultimately with corporations, because all this spending, I mean, all these trillions of dollars, though the total sum was much bigger at the start, are going to be funneled through corporations. Corporations are going to build the bridges, to repair the roads, to build the railways, to do all these public works that the US needs. And that is good, but there can be a far more active and a far more constructive way in which the state intervenes. So again, let's go back to the New Deal. I mean, Franklin Delano Roosevelt didn't just spend a lot of money. He also created many institutions, many agencies, many state agencies, like the Tennessee Valley Authority, many authorities around the US, where there were functionaries, there were bureaucrats. We should also reclaim bureaucrats because they have a function, allowed the state not only to spend money, but to actually shape society, to reorganize society. So that is the ambition that we should have. It shouldn't just be the ambition of building things. It should just be the ambition of providing stimulus or providing subsidies and transfer for how important they are. The ambition should be much bigger. It should be reorganizing society through the state and recreating also community using the state as a lever. Because that is also what happened with the New Deal. The New Deal allowed trade unions to strengthen, community organizations to strengthen. So I'm not saying that the state is the solution. I'm seeing more the state and a recuperation of the state as an instrument to reconstruct social capacity in society as a whole.
And to pull some members of society away from a nationalist vision of the world, because without the more expansive vision that you describe, that is the more likely outcome, I would argue.
Yes, I mean, I think that these kind of projects, these kind of collective projects, these kind of national plans, and these forms of democratic planning, right, where the state is inviting citizens to discuss, to get on board, to get involved, are the best way to create a healthy pride in your community, in your locality, and in your nation, because there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when national identity is connected with resentment. When national identity is purely a negative identity, it is not something you are proud of, but it is something that is linked to a sense of regret, to a melancholic yearning for something that doesn't exist. Right? So in a way, the best antidote to nationalism is a healthy, progressive patriotism, but grounded precisely in these concrete and material things that change people's lives for the better.
In what way can you mention bureaucrats? In what way can bureaucrats aid in that effort?
You know, bureaucracy is a very bad name and very bad press. But there is no modernity and there is no civilization, there is no technology without bureaucracy. Right? Bureaucracy is what allows the state to know the world, like to know levels of pollution, for example, to know levels of poverty, to know how many patients you need to care for in a given area or region. And the state, by being rolled back, has actually lost so much of its ability to know the world. So that now often it needs to resort to these big four, like to these corporations that are providing consultancy to do very basic things that the state should do in-house.
Yes.
And why they're doing that, obviously, they are also distorting the state's agenda and its priorities in a direction that is more conducive to their own agenda. So actually, a fundamental step here is creating new state functionaries, new state bureaucrats, especially recruited from the youth and also from working class backgrounds, because in so many areas there's need for new agencies that are fundamental to create this active and directive state.
An expansive bureaucracy, but one that is not, expanding within its current context. One that is expanding in the roles and systems that have to be new and created. I guess I was wondering if you could touch a little bit more on that concept of corporations serving state functions, because particularly in the pandemic here in the United States, we've seen the pitfalls of that. We're seeing it right now in the booster rollout. I mean, the fact we've contracted that out to drugstore companies to handle that, it's not gone that great here relative to Canada, other countries that are similar in status, wealth-wise, etc. But like even our lack of infrastructure, the only thing that's comparable or that's as expansive or even more expansive than state infrastructure is, say, Amazon's infrastructure. And so we have to fall back on outsourcing our projects to those corporations like that. I mean, how does that tension get broken?
Yeah, that is really wrong. Right? I mean, outsourcing functions that should be government's functions to private actors, disempowers the state and deprives the state of capacity, but also of the ability to decide autonomously from economic actors. On so many levels, there are opportunities to create new public agencies and new state-owned and publicly owned companies. Think about the local level. I mean, there's many cities in Europe, for example, Barcelona, where new public energy companies have been created to deal with climate change. because it is far, far easier, instead of telling companies what they need to do, instead of giving them targets on what they need to do, instead of telling them you need to produce renewables, it is far easier for a public authority, for example, a city council, to create a municipal company to produce energy, so that the company already embodies, already follows the guidelines that have been collectively decided. Food production and delivery. I mean, why do we need always to rely on all these companies that pay very bad salaries to workers and are not following any kind of public criterion? I mean, there's many sectors in which the state can also take a proactive role as a producer and distributor of goods that can also be public goods.
And lastly, this is more towards the conclusion of your book, where you talk a little bit about how the pandemic laid bare the pitfalls or the inability for the populist right wing to meet certain moments, as for example, the inability to accept science, the rejection of it, and the clear fault lines between the vision that the left can create with a strong state versus what the right has been leaning on. Do you mind talking a bit about those differences and how the shock of the pandemic made those differences a bit clearer?
The strategy of the right hinges on this attempt to present itself as a champion of ordinary people. It cannot do that on the economic front, because otherwise it would need to tax the rich. And it doesn't want to do that. It wants to protect the rich. Therefore, the only way in which it can do that is by waging the famous culture war, right? Which revolves around presenting this battle between ordinary people, especially located in peripheral areas, exurban and rural areas, and the elite, like middle-class people, people with college degrees, and so on and so forth, located in metropolitan areas. So these, the way in which the populist right has channeled these conspiracy theories during the pandemic was very much part of this broader strategy, right? Because doctors, scientists were presented as the new face of the progressive elites. Right? They were figures who were telling ordinary people what they needed to do. You need to wear a mask, you need to get a jab, you need to do this and that. And the right presented all these all these measures not as something based on necessity. You need to do it because actually there is a need for that, but based whatever on arbitrary decisions made by someone somewhere for mysterious reasons and potentially to profit on people in some mysterious way. And that kind of narrative was very effective for a small core of people, a small militant core. I mean, small, but scarily big enough, right? I mean, there's some people, unfortunately, in society, we have come to realize that are really prone to buy into narratives that are lunatic. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to describe that. Yet at the same time, by the risk for the right is that if it follows the track, it ends up distancing itself from the majority of the electorate that often is not ready to buy into these narratives, including a sizable proportion of the Republican electorate, right? And therefore, sometimes it is forced to play a balancing act that can be quite dangerous given the moralistic character of culture wars. I mean, witness Donald Trump when, I think it was last August, he told a Republican audience that they had to get a jab, which was in his own self-interest, because if those people get COVID and die, I mean, those people are not going to vote for the Republican Party anymore, right? Yeah. He was booed, right, by the public, and similar things have happened with other leaders. Also now Putin and sympathy for Putin, alliance with Putin, and even being bankrolled by Putin, as it is the case with some populist right leaders, is in a way coming back to haunt some populist leaders, right? It's quite paradoxical because these are people who represent themselves as the defenders of national interests and now can be easily cast as basically fifth columns of a very dangerous figure that has invaded Ukraine, creating a bloodshed.
And actually, lastly, what is your opinion on how they are able to walk that tightrope currently? I hope it backfires and I hope it's as dangerous as you say. But my perception of it is that they conflate cultural elites, doctors, as you say, experts, people who they present as talking down to you, as they conflate those experts with cultural elites as opposed to the moneyed elites that the left and the capitalists that the left should be coalescing behind combating. And they're able to muddy the waters to a degree that benefits them at the very least in the short term electorally.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, never underestimate the ability of the right to walk a tightrope and to juggle apparently irreconcilable ideas and demands. That is partly to do with the fact that why the center left, and the left in particular, has this very high self-image and is very wary of going into contradictions between its morality and its politics. That is usually not such a big problem for the right. The right is very able to change according to circumstances, to adapt. It is far more malleable, which is a huge advantage. And it's also the reason why they adapted to this new situation much earlier than the left. They were already into this new post-neoliberal framework in the mid-2010s, basically, while we are now basically just catching up there. Yet at the same time, you also need to say that there is a certain memory, despite our very short attention spans. So you saw now there was this very peculiar scene recently of Salvini, the leader of the populist right party in Italy, Lega, who was ridiculed in a Polish town where he had gone to offer his solidarity to Ukrainian refugees, and the Polish mayor of the town showed the T-shirt with which Salvini had taken a selfie, a T-shirt celebrating Putin. So he was completely ridiculed in front of the crowd, right? So, I mean, people remember things and people learn things. The problem, though, I think, is lack of decisiveness on the left, lack of decisiveness by our politicians. I mean, look at Biden. Like, he's always, one step ahead and one step backwards, saying one thing and then retreating and then denying what he said. Why? Comparing with Trump, Trump never said, I was wrong, basically, right? Never backtracked. Never. So I'm not saying that one has to do like Trump, but neither one has to constantly correct, constantly, justify, moderate. I think a bit more self-assuredness, a bit more boldness, a bit more self-belief ultimately in our values and our ability to change society is a fundamental ingredient if we are to avoid the populist right coming back, which is unfortunately, a very serious, a very real scenario in the case of the US in particular.
Paolo Gerbaudo, sociologist and author of The Great Recoil, Politics After Populism and the Pandemic. Paolo, thank you so much for your time today. It was really excellent. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
With that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program. But first, Matt, what happened last night on Left Reckoning?
Oh yeah, Elias Cepeda.
Whoa!
Yeah, look at that. I will be on a little bit on camera this week.
Oh my goodness.
We had Elias Cepeda on. We talked about UFC and Dana White, and I'm really fascinated by Marxist critiques of sporting. And UFC is insane. First of all, the athletes do not have a union.
Yep.
UFC.
Are they still independent contractors, or was that
Yes.
the WWE? I couldn't remember.
They're still independent contractors.
Because John Oliver did a segment on it a while ago that I was damning.
And UFC stands for United Fighting Championships, right? Maybe I'm wrong about that. I assume that's what the EU mean, but anyway,
Yeah.
they don't have unions.
Bradley says WWE also doesn't have a union, so there you go.
And they also Elias went into this interesting thing of basically some owners were on the Nevada Gaming Commission and rejected UFC's bid to become get the official imprimatur of the gaming commission. And then after they denied that and UFC sort of value tanked, they went and bought UFC. And then now it's some really crazy stuff. So we talked about that a little bit in Dana White's racism. And we also talked about Bernie 2024 and Julian Assange. And then we had a good fun post game. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. This weekend for patrons, I'll be talking to Brian Box Brown about pot legalization, where we stand. We talked with him earlier in Left Reckoning, and we're going to go back for an update. So look forward to that.
What's interesting too that you could get into, I don't know if you did, but maybe in a part 2, if you focused, you did the UFC and then also the WWE, all that Linda McMahon stuff and the McMahon connections to the Republican Party are interesting as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. They founded WWE and then she got some cushy job in the Trump administration. Big Republican donors. Yeah. Those ties are fascinating. Do we have oh, there we do. Oh, wow. We do have Brandon and Matt, who will appear on screen very shortly. Or if they can't appear on screen, just put their audio up or whatever, and they can explain what's happening on their shows before we head to the fun half.
Sorry, I'm having an issue with the Thursday frames. We might have to take a break and frame them up. Yeah.
All right. Well, check out Doomed. Check out the Scam Economy. Check out the Discourse. Pretty please do it. And then in the fun half, we'll have our friends Binder and Brandon explain what's happening on their shows. 646-257-3920. We will see you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on?
It's nuts.
Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry.
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so Binder and Brandon, can you
There we go.
There's Brandon. And we just need Binder now. Brandon, can you speak for a second?
Hello?
Look at that. That's working. And
Beautiful. Beautiful.
But what about
we got a little bit of a glitch there. And Binder also, this is really frustrating because Binder, speak once.
can the broadcast hear Binder? No?
No.
We can only hear him?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's something wrong with OBS and ping. So fuck, I don't know what to do. I'm gonna take a quick break.
Yep. We are back.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Great job, Matt. We
Wow.
have Binder and we have Brandon, and plug away, guys. What's happening on Doom, Scam Economy, and the Discourse?
Why don't you go first, Brandon, just so people can make sure that they can hear me in the chat once it catches up with the stream.
Sure, absolutely. Fresh off my first Twitter suspension, we're going to be talking about that this week on the Discourse. We're going to finally get back into the studio. Hell or high water. I forgot last week was Easter when I set up recording. So, we're going to be talking about how I was unfairly silenced by the online machine for spreading conspiracy theories about snake venom.
They didn't catch on to your sarcasm quickly enough.
I don't think it was sarcastic when I said, I think I was pretty clearly anti-conspiracy, but I felt as though like trying to defend it as sarcasm or clearly anti-conspiracy, anti the conspiracy with the username that I currently have, which is like Venom3 : Envenom Nation would have seemed a little bit like, I don't know.
Overkill.
Fair enough. I kind of deserve that one.
All right. Binder, what's happening on Scam Economy?
All right.
And
So
Doomed as well.
Right. Yes. So on Scam Economy tonight, it will be an episode where listeners, a couple weeks ago, a bunch of listeners called in, completely unplanned, and they all had a similar story to share about dating apps and crypto scams on them. And so I felt like it was a great episode for the main show. So tonight's show will be a bunch of listeners who had very interesting, crazy experiences with these crypto scammers on these dating apps. And then on Doomed yesterday on the live stream, and the podcast will be up later today, I had Taylor Lorenz on the show to talk about Libs of TikTok, right? Libs of TikTok, the anti-LGBT really hate account that's been going viral on the right, spreading all sorts of horrible things. They were revealed, their identity was revealed, and the right doesn't like that. The right doesn't like when what their fave does to other people is actually done to their fave as well.
Yeah, it's a really good thing what happened. Good on you for Evan Taylor. Good for her for doing that journalism.
Maybe we should see if she's available tomorrow.
Love that. That'd be funny.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, sorry to steal your guest idea.
Oh, it's all right. It's all right. I regularly, I regularly scoop the majority part. It's okay. But I guess I should also add right here after saying that, folks, patreon.com/MattBinder.
Do it.
We have a clip here on the Taylor Lorenz thing if we want to.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, let's just seamlessly transition into this. Here is Donald Trump Jr. weighing in on Taylor Lorenz's journalism, where she uncovered the justly the creator of the Libs of TikTok account that is responsible for targeting harassment at LGBTQ teachers by reposting their social media posts in order to direct right-wing hatred towards them. Don Jr. in his regular selfie videos, yeah. I mean, I'm not really into the way that the fireplace, but to each their own.
Looks expensive.
I don't like that. I don't like that stone. Regardless, here he is with his take.
Who controls that account? Again, she's not showing up to Antifa homes and saying, hey, you looted, rioted, murdered, stole, arson, whatever. Like, none of that. She's not showing up to the teachers like, it seems pretty clear you're trying to indoctrinate children. She won't question them. She shows up to a parody account. I mean, this should be grounds for a restraining order after sobbing on national TV like 2 weeks ago, claiming she's been a victim of harassment. She shows up at the house of relatives of just ordinary citizens and badgered them, according to...
He's yeah, there's something up with his eyes always. He has trouble keeping them open, but I also think he's reading here. He has this prepared.
Can we just like define this private citizen? Like, how many followers did Libs of TikTok have? Over like 6 figures, right?
Over 600,000 followers. But on top of that, this is a person who was regularly in contact with Ron DeSantis's press secretary on Twitter, had boasted previously about having a direct line to the Texas Attorney General's office. Right. Was literally influencing policy. I mean, weird that the 2 states that she happened to have direct contact with are also 2 of the states that have been ruthlessly going after LGBT
What
youth.
a coincidence.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and just look at Ron DeSantis's press secretaries. I must be dozens, if not, maybe even 100 tweets since Taylor Lorenz's story published, where she's like flipping out over Libs of TikTok's identity being revealed. Also, I want to add that, and I spoke with Taylor about this, and she confirmed it 100%, even though he's claiming otherwise. Libs of TikTok also somehow had a direct line to Glenn Greenwald, very influential figure, whether you want to consider him a journalist, or as Taylor Lorenz called him, an online influencer.
I was going to ask about that. So has Greenwald, what has he responded to, like these reports that this account has ties to like DeSantis' office and stuff like that?
Of course.
He was very defensive, saying, how could you, he was making the same argument Trump Jr. This is the exact same argument Greenwald was making.
Well, here's the thing. Glenn Greenwald's embarrassed because he actually is the reason why Libs of TikTok was outed.
I know. He confirmed it to Taylor.
Yes.
Taylor's the doxer. Taylor's the one who, this poor innocent person who is coordinating with different government officials and is working with the Babylon Bee and other right-wing organizations. She just did a little bit of journalism. That's the doxing, as opposed to his confirmation of it, which was the thing that actually made it clear.
I mean, maybe it was a foreign influence campaign straight from the streets of Brazil, because it seems like Glenn Greenwald is the one who's behind the doxing, quote unquote, of Libs of TikTok. Taylor told me straight up that she went to the house just to confirm it was that Chaya Raichik, because there's multiple people with that name, Chaya Raichik, and she went to the house, did not get any info from the person at the door, left, was very polite, left, and she was ready to, she was looking over the report. She said she had language in the report that, was very, she called like, language that wasn't like super, like, maybe it wouldn't even run. And Glenn Greenwald then that night tweets, Taylor Lorenz went to Libs of TikTok's house. A relative's house, and Taylor said that was it. That was the confirmation. That was all she needed to tie it all together and take out any language that was not confirming of it.
Look at that. That just genius stuff. And that's the DeSantis spokeswoman is Christina Pushaw, right? That's her name?
Yes, that's who it is. Yes.
And like I've been following her for. She's actually how I found out about this story, and found out that I liked that it happened. Because I started following her like a few weeks ago because she's just this nasty Nazi that's pushing this LGBT stuff, this groomer stuff all over the place. Yeah, I mean it's a shame to see Glenn protect people like Ron DeSantis' spokespeople because he's implicated in being like a godfather of this account. What did he say? He loved it or something like that?
Oh no, he literally tweeted that he is the godfather of that account. That was his exact words. Yeah, and he also
culture, I'll just say, let me just butt in real quickly. Like,
yeah, go ahead.
This is like par for the course for what I've observed for Greenwald like the last decade. He's always been in the contributing to these nasty this nasty type of culture, and then feigning like principle that it's actually just to make sure people can be heard and free speech and stuff like this. But this is the type of people that he goes to bat for.
I mean, his Dave Rubin arc is fairly complete because thankfully he can be a voice on the right wing who is married to a man who can defend these homophobic attacks on LGBTQ members of American society and then pretend there's some moral principle based on free speech ascribed to it so that it cloaks the complete immorality of the position in some artificiality.
I will say
I should also mention, I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention this too, that Glenn recently came out and said something like, he doesn't see the vitriol towards gay people from the right like he does from the left, and specifically said how, the word groomer he sees thrown around by the left and not so much on the right. This account, Libs of TikTok, is literally the reason why that word has had a huge uptick on the right, and they've adopted it as their new slur for people. This account accuses everyone of being a groomer for simply literally being LGBTQ. And I should say, a lot of the attention has gone on what this the Libs of TikTok account has done to LGBTQ teachers, because that's their recent sort of path. That's what they're doing now. I guess they found that that's more palatable to people than what they were previously doing, which was literally actually putting LGBTQ youth themselves on blast, literally sending harassment to young LGBTQ people on TikTok for their videos, making fun of them for like the color of their hair or how they dress. Here, pull this tweet that I found that they had since deleted to see what this account does, because the right claims they just pull videos from TikTok and let the libs speak for themselves. Pull up this tweet so you can see what the Libs of TikTok account really does.
Sorry, just give me 1 second to transfer it from computer to computer.
Yeah, sure. No problem. I can read it. No problem. So basically, they quote tweeted a tweet from the Trevor Project, which is a suicide prevention organization that has a hotline for LGBTQ youth. And the Trevor Project tweet was basically just how LGBTQ teens can contact Trevor Project securely without, being outed to their parents or whomever they're trying to, whoever they're being harassed by. And the Libs of TikTok account quote tweeted that tweet from the Trevor Project and said the Trevor Project is a grooming organization, called them a grooming organization.
They want trans and gay kids to die. I mean, like, let's be real here. That's what they want.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, that's what they want. It's for real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Brandon,
They also attack, I'm sorry, but they also attack, I've seen them attack. There was a video from a woman who's on the Trillbillies where, she was involved with some like sex ed camp for like older teens or something like that, like over Zoom, and they attacked her for running this camp, claiming that she was trying to groom young children. And then they attack the trans story time events at public libraries. But remember, their whole spiel is that they out these people because parents should have a say over their children, which I guess works in their, demented worldview for like public schools. But how does it work with the trans storytime hour and this Trillbillies sex camp education Zoom class, when those are things that the parents would have to sign them up for? In reality, they don't want the parents to have a say over any of this. Yeah. They want to have a say over this. They do not want LGBTQ people to exist. Children, teachers, anyone. They want them eradicated.
Brandon, sorry, I just wanted to give you an opening, but that was an epic rant by Binder. So
no, it's good for the context because from my perspective, I spend a lot less time on Twitter, which is no shade to anybody, but at the sort of broad strokes, it feels like the right wing like props up a new villain every week. There's like a new trending right wing villain account every week that is being propped up by the typical suspects, right wing content creators, as a way to like ventriloquize their more base desires, some account that's like more transparent in what they're about, and they just do the retweet quote tweet game where like, I'm not really taking responsibility for what everything this account says, but I think this is funny, or I think it's cute, or I think it's it's an account worth watching, stuff like that, so that they have this level of plausible deniability when people come out and go like, well, aren't you just like anti-trans, or aren't you just like anti-gay? They can go like, no, I just retweet that stuff 99% of the time. I just retweet, that's no indication of my personal politics, because retweets aren't endorsements, like childish games like that, where you can like craft an entire platform around like criticizing things that you clearly do not like, but as long as you never like outwardly say, well, I'm right wing, you get plausible deniability. And accounts like that provide that. And then they also provide a vehicle to pretend like the left, in really broad strokes, the left is some kind of anti-empathy, anti-working class part of the political spectrum, because they go after accounts like this. They go after people who have been, maybe not this person, but I think Barry Weiss has like a canceled corner section of her newsletter that is all about these people who have been convinced to, due to alienation, due to right-wing propaganda, to alienate themselves further from their social circles, from their jobs, etc., by being like, the person in real life who spews right-wing hate. And when people react, obviously, how they would react to that in real life, they get to pretend like, oh, look at just this random everyday person who I've been promoting for the past 2 weeks. The left hates people like this who just want to, share their normal ideas and be normal online. And it's just like, it's such a transparent game that it's really just unfortunate for the people who actually fall into that level of conspiracy and propaganda that like end up just being used as like the weekly monster of the week for the right wing to prop up and then discard 2 months down the road when they're no longer like profitable or no longer what's trending. And then they're just left to pick up the pieces of their life if they can, or they just fall into QAnon or whatever.
Yeah. I want to focus or bring back to what Binder said about when Greenwald was talking about how you actually see a lot of the grooming stuff come from the liberal left. And I wonder how Alex Morse feels about that, right? Which, like, that really gives the game away, is what Glenn's interested in doing, is bullshit in a way that hurts the left. Because that was a case where a young, more left challenger was smeared by the centrist Democrats. So again, it was once again coming from the right. But also, has Bolsonaro Liam on Twitter posts this. For some reason, Glenn Greenwald has changed his view on anonymous outlets that harass and defame people and try to get them fired. And this is just a tweets from Glenn. Look at how disgusting this. It's always interesting when Glenn uses his adjectives.
Yeah.
Look at how disgusting this Canary Mission website is. The people who run it are the worst cowards, hiding behind anonymity, but they publish names of students and professors they claim are, quote, racist due to Israel criticisms.
And that was in 2018.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing to know about Greenwald is he's a bullshitter and doesn't care about consistency.
Good to know. All right, let's have some fun, shall we, though, with this Rudy Giuliani clip. I've been waiting since last night. It's felt like a week to talk about Rudy Giuliani on The Masked Singer. This footage, I mean, it's like the most anticipated thing for me since, like, I'm sure how most teenage boys feel about a Marvel movie. I was so pumped to watch Rudy Giuliani on The Masked Singer, and it's as dystopian, as bad acid trippy as you might think. Here it is. Giuliani is revealed as the Masked Singer, dressed as some sort of colorful parrot in the Jack in the Box, and sings "Bad to the Bone."
Associate Attorney General, former mayor of New York City. Is that public TV? No, that's not Robert. Rudy Giuliani! No way! Oh my God! Wow!
I can't have to show a real picture of it.
I had no idea. Wow, this is definitely something I never would have guessed.
Can you pause it for a sec? So
Why?
notice that Kim Jong, well, they've had Sarah Palin right before the pandemic
Exactly.
started, dressed as some sort of colorful animal as well. She sang "Baby Got Back." No, just keep it up there. But like, so Robin Thicke putting on, I would have never expected this. Jenny McCarthy is like about to start crying out of joy.
Yeah, she's loving it.
She's loving it. And
No surprise though.
Ken Jeong's pissed.
Ken Jeong's like, how many times can I say I truly didn't know who the person was going to be, and I object to their entire public sort of work.
Yeah, but like, I mean, this is what the show is, right? It ends like this every time. I would have never guessed.
It's peekaboo. It's like it's goo goo gaga for
I know.
adults. Like I never expected that. Like the whole point of this is like.
Yeah, they're in a mask.
Yeah,
God damn it. All right,
it's a
keep
reveal.
going.
Okay. Well, Mr. Giuliani, with all of the controversy that's surrounding you right now, I think it surprises us all that you're here on The Masked Singer. Why? Me too. Me too. Man, what made you decide to do this?
Well, I guess the main reason is I just had a granddaughter, Grace, and I want her to know that you should try everything.
The simplest people in the world.
All right, pause it. I'm sorry. So Jenny McCarthy goes, this is just a way this is his reclamation project here, right? Like that's why he goes on there. So he can say in the middle of him being embroiled in the January 6th commission nonsense, well, not nonsense, but the investigation, his role in
a coup
attempt. He just wants to show his granddaughter that Poppy has fun.
And some
See, you can do election fraud and dance on TV.
Like
yeah,
the whole, it's just so false though. Like Nick Cannon being like, you're here, ha ha, it's like he feels that simultaneously like yes, he's going to do his job and like have an affable conversation with the guy, but you need to like throw in that I'm not super like thrilled about this. If you read between the lines, it's just embarrassing.
Yeah,
there are only so many Z-list
Like you and unlikely, and I couldn't think of anything more unlike me and unlikely than this. And I enjoy the show. I have for years. And it just seemed like it would be fun. And I don't get to have a lot of fun.
I just would like to know, in your package, it said you officiated 200 weddings. Is that true?
Absolutely true. But the mayor of New York can marry people. And when I found out I could
Wait,
do
can you
that,
pause it?
Yeah.
took advantage of doing a wedding anytime I could because being mayor.
That's the notable fun fact about Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah,
that's the one that's in his package. Really interesting thing we just found out about you, Rudy Giuliani. You've officiated 200 weddings.
Oh my
that's
God.
I can assure you that's not the most interesting thing Rudy Giuliani has done.
Yeah.
What's your favorite color, boxers or briefs? When you put your hand down your pants during that Sacha Baron Cohen sting on you, do you want to talk about that?
Rudy, we have tasked a team of dozen researchers for 3 days to try to find a apolitical trivia fact about you, and we actually found one. So here it is. Nobody can get offended about this. You've just done a lot of weddings. That's nice.
He's
Family.
a romantic. He's a romantic type.
Yep. Yeah. He loves long walks on the beach.
can be a very tough job. You deal with tragedy. So if you can do a wedding, it kind of lifts your day. It's kind of like doing the show. Why I did the show.
Right. And your family's gonna love it.
For your granddaughter, there's no better reason to do a show like this, man.
Well, I have to tell you, this was a really wonderful experience.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you very much.
And right now, here to perform
Editing is weird.
Oh my goodness.
Once and for all, the artist formerly known as the Jack in the Box. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Rudy Giuliani.
Cheers.
Before I take you, break it down a little more, baby. Before I am through.
Come on, Ken. Go fight him.
He should have. I think Giuliani's mistake was not doing like White Crime by Little Dicky instead. You know, because if he had won the show, they could never put him in jail after that.
Do you guys now want to hear his rendition of Bad to the Bone?
I don't at all.
We might
Also,
be copyright struck, although he does it in
Yeah.
spoken word. He's at the Smash Poetry Bad to the Bone thing. He's doing the Rex Harrison in My Fair Lady, right? You can't actually sing, so I'm just gonna kind of speak to the beat.
right.
I just think it's interesting that like, or maybe it speaks to like a serious intellectual, just like lack of, I don't know, reflection in most Americans, that like the most redeeming thing that somebody who like hates literally everybody or like is out to make the world a worse place objectively can do is like treat their family nice. And then like that's just like a positive characteristic that people are like,
Yeah.
oh, he tried to usher in a new age of global fascism, but he sure does love his dogs. And you're like, yeah, I mean,
He
no,
also doesn't even do that. I mean, like his past with marriages, I think, is a bit checkered in terms of like moving from woman to the next woman. So, but he does have
Super cares.
offspring, and they had offspring, so that makes him cuddly.
Yeah,
I mean,
he super gives a fuck about them.
it's definitely overstating. It's rather, it's definitely overstating his role in the Trump administration to say he even like helped try to usher in anything. He was just like a hype man for the world's like worst president.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the worst president of the last like, I don't know, well, of 2017 and 2020 probably.
Probably.
We should also note that the this show is very heavily edited, and from the original reports, it actually said that Robin Thicke and Ken Jeong left right away and had to be convinced to come back out to continue doing the show. So they might have actually, everything you saw might have happened after they walked out originally.
Well, because they
Also-
keep just doing a cut to Robin Thicke going, "This is great," and then they cut back to Rudy Giuliani. The only thing they did show that was accurate was Ken Jeong does walk off at the end here.
Yes. Also, it should be noted that they actually say in the in their little disclosure at the bottom during this episode that due to COVID-19 protocols, clips from the audience are actually also taken from other episodes of the show. So those reactions you see, which has to really suck for the people in those reactions.
I had
like
that thought too. Yeah, that's
like if
I was
you're
like,
like-
that's not people going like,
right.
Rudy, yeah, this is hilarious.
Yeah,
Right.
your
Like,
reaction
there's
like
that-
Nicholas Shea being there, and it's like, and then you just splice it over Rudy Giuliani. Right? That's real,
Right,
real
right.
trash
Right.
hour.
Matt has something pulled up on the screen.
I mean, the thing about it is like with Ken Jeong's reaction, it's like, what show did you think you were on? They've literally done this exact same thing. Here's the Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
Can I be your hype man?
Can I be your hype man?
You get sprung. Oh my God, what is that?
And I'm pretty
I'll
sure they
say-
had like Spice or someone on. Sorry if that audio was really loud.
Spicer
for a
did
second.
Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, right.
I'll say the difference between Palin and Giuliani for the people who were there might be that at that point in the timeline of Sarah Palin, she was more of a reality TV show person than a politician, whereas Rudy Giuliani is literally fresh off, I should say, of trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I just watched Game Change like last week, the HBO special that I always talk about being the defining moment of my political
I
awakening.
remember it too. Yes.
Yeah, I just watched that last week, and that came out in 2012. and it was very harsh on Sarah Palin and very forgiving on John McCain, to be perfectly honest, as though it was trying to frame him
And
as like
Steve Schmidt, portrayed by Woody Harrelson, and Nicole Wallace, who plays her in it.
Nicole Walsh. Oh my gosh.
I'm
Something
looking it up.
not a Pullman. I always think she looks like Vera Farmiga, but I cannot remember.
Sarah
Sarah
Paulson.
Pullman?
I was
Oh,
about
Sarah
to say it
Paulson,
was
yeah.
Sarah Paulson, and it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like, it's very trying to redeem John McCain, even as the movie starts with him saying that he wishes like Joe Lieberman would have been his running mate, as though that would have resulted in a better a better outcome. But frankly, he was worse on Sarah Palin's career than Sarah Palin on his career. Like, they pulled Sarah Palin. This is not like to defend Sarah Palin, but they pulled Sarah Palin into the spotlight when that kind of like persona on the Republican Party was not like mainstream. Now
She was Trump before Trump was Trump. And she's not as good at it, but it's the same like raw material.
Exactly. If she had been percolating up in, Alaska as like a Tea Party darling instead of the vice presidential pick for John McCain between like 2008 till like 2016, she could have run in that primary and maybe she wouldn't have beat Trump, but she would have, put up a fight. But, her entire career got like derailed by that and her own personal like family drama. And then she ends up in like Sarah Palin's Alaska and like the next year on MTV at the height of MTV trash reality television shows. So I think that she's trying to make a comeback now, and that started it. She sees the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Lauren Bobberts, and this like that could have been Sarah Palin, but at a higher level.
Yep.
She was before her time.
She was
before her time.
A trailblazer.
She was.
And they don't even see the thing is they don't even pay her lip service. The Republican Party, like, because she was blamed for John McCain's terrible performance, like kind of just, distanced themselves from Sarah Palin. But, she set the standard.
She did. But anyway, I could be a host on The Masked Singer. All I have to do and get paid, what, like $2 million for 5 weeks of work of just saying, what?
This is the last thing I was expecting until next week, when that will be the last thing I'm expecting.
This is crazy. Yeah. They need their heads to explode or like to start, foaming at the mouth or something next time.
I mean, come on, folks, watch a show for adults like Lego Masters.
I've actually recently gotten into building Lego models. So, I mean, I might start. I think that's hosted by Job from Arrested Development.
Exactly.
It is?
Yeah.
Because he was he was in the Lego movie, right?
Oh, really?
He played Batman in the Lego movie.
That makes sense.
He was really good.
I have a lot. I could talk for hours about Legos because I really do Lego, as people like to say. But the problem with
That's
Lego,
the plural of Lego.
Yeah, but the problem I have with it is it is expensive. It's like, and I get upset about intellectual property protection too, because they're clearly like stopping people from making their own competitor blocks because we have cornered the market on stacking things together.
Matt, you could still enjoy Legos even if they're not sharing their IP.
It's too expensive though. Like if it was cheap, then I wouldn't care about the IP. I'd be like, fine, you can have that monopoly. But it's like for a decent set, I never got like the biggest sets as a kid, like because they're like $120 or like $80. It's like I'll get the $35 one, and that is like a car. Anyway, I'm bitter.
You can start playing with Meccano like the British do.
I don't like the sound of that.
Exactly. Yeah, no one does. That's why Lego. That's why people pay $300 for Lego.
All right, let's read some IMs because we haven't even done any of those yet. Sam's hanging Chad. John Oliver did a show last week on interrogation techniques that happened to be the same that were used in the Melissa Lucio case and are used basically in every case. He also talked about how a lot of time these lead to false confessions that are hard to overturn, even when evidence clearly shows the person is innocent. It turns my stomach thinking about how this lady might be dead in a week while people like Kyle Rittenhouse are doing talk shows. I know. And speaking of events, even the psycho Navy SEAL convicted of war crimes was pardoned, but this lady, she has to die. But systemic racism doesn't exist. It could be really well said. And I just want to point out, like, John Oliver, I forget, did he do that terrible Brazil segment? Like, he's pretty awful in foreign policy, but in terms of some of this domestic stuff, he is a very helpful person to, like, someone asked, how can I get my like normie parents or friends to get on the left, and we recommended TYT and Jank. He's a really good communicator in that. I'm not saying it's normie and he's been involved forever, but he's like, I think it's just more accessible. John Oliver's also good for that. Emma Rocks won. Thank you. I wish we could get rid of fascism in our government. Instead, Democrats and Republicans, how about dumb and stupid? There's no difference. They're all Hitlers making money off the poor. Nina Turner. Okay. I wouldn't say they're all Hitlers, but but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we can get a little bit more resolution in our image of this stuff than just Hitler.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I might agree, but also I think like Lego, the plural of Hitler is Hitler. So
Yeah.
it's like they're all Hitler.
Hitler is ubiquitous.
538 Hitler.
Yeah.
Not yeah, exactly. Like not to make light of that many Hitler, but you know, his birthday was yesterday, so you got to just be like, you know, they you know, really they're all on a range. They're like on the Hitler scale. Like some of them are like 0.25 Hitler, and some of them are like 3x Hitler. You know,
You heard of the Richter scale? Have you heard of the Hitler scale?
Oh, you just reminded me, being that you said Hitler's birthday was yesterday. Today is a very special majority report regular listener's birthday. My dad, Binder Dad. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday,
Dad.
Binder Dad!
Happy birthday, Binder Dad!
Woo!
Happy birthday.
Sorry that Hitler's birthday reminded me that your birthday was the next day.
Yeah.
Hitler's birthday reminded me of the Binance scandal from yesterday that I was only online before being suspended long enough to post about, where they released their new branded hashtag that was very, you know, I don't want to say Hitler-esque, but Hitler adjacent.
Yes. Yes.
I got distracted. Maybe we can get a shofar for Binder's dad.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna do that real quick. Matt just has to get up out of his seat to do it.
All right, here we go.
Shofar for Binder Dad incoming.
Here we go. Any minute. There we go. Thank you, guys. I was actually envisioning a scenario where Matt got up, pressed the button, didn't realize the volume for that sound wasn't up, came back around, had to turn it up, then go back over.
I had
and
that
then that
thought
would have
too.
been, yeah.
But thankfully we figured it out. Le Petit, Emma, Matt, yesterday you scoffed when someone asked about your lack of awareness of how much Ethan Klein is suffering. We did not. We said we don't know what's happening. You owe him a lot. You owe a lot to him, as you got most subscribers ever in revenue after Sam getting featured by him. Even Sam has not even shown a hint of support. He literally increased your channel's reach tenfold, if not more, and you couldn't care less.
Yeah, listen, dummy, you've just wasted 2 IMs on not detailing what the actual thing we're supposed to know about.
Yeah, tell us what happened. I have no idea either.
Yeah, I mean, Ethan seems like a good guy. I said that yesterday. I've liked him. I don't know him personally. We've barely spoken. We've spoken a little bit, and he seems great. That's my opinion of Ethan.
Yeah, I again, you could have just told us what happened, and instead you lambasted us in a, I'm sorry, unhinged way for not knowing, and I still don't know, and I'm frankly unlikely to research.
Yes, because
I got things to do.
Right, we have jobs, and your manufactured parasocial connection between us and Ethan is all in your mind. The best is leftists. As a leftist, I feel like my existence is futile. I'm constantly defending the left to the non-political crowd that listens to people like Joe Rogan and think the left is anti-speech and anti-comedy and anti-everything, while the insanity on the right is ignored. Then I go online, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, and it's nonstop leftist bashing leftist content creators for dumb shit like wearing an expensive shirt. We have no chance with such useless people just tearing down the left, while literal fascism is brewing on the right. I agree there should be less of that.
Yeah, I think also tap out a little bit. You don't need to be constantly on the defense in your real life or online. You know, that's, I mean, watch the playoffs.
I mean, I also think that, you know, part of that first statement is the truth, and maybe let's get to a lot of people in a way to understand where it's like you actually have to, for your own, you know, for your own personal self, like determine what you consider to be the boundaries of like leftism, and just like stop letting people define themselves as that, and or define their enemies as that, and then be like react merely to like the labels and the like the unfair definitions. It is definitely unfortunate that like for the most part centrists and right wingers have the ability to define what constitutes like leftism for the vast majority of like Americans. But a lot of times when people talk about leftist infighting online, they're just talking about a smattering of people who may or may not describe themselves as leftists, depending on what they actually do, or just rather don't define themselves as right wingers, having disagreements over a range of topics, some of which have to do with politics and some of which are personal, and some of which are like personal problems and personal prerogatives being mapped onto larger political projects. So, I think a lot of people just have to detach from the content creator and content consumption economy, and like really do the work to define what like leftism means for them, apart from like a handful of people who talk online about it, or even just like books that you read about it, because at that point you're just working reactively.
It's all mediated.
Connor from Seattle. Yo, Binder, great interview last night. Really loving your shows, especially Scam Economy. I just watched Q Into the Storm. Have you ever had, or do you think you could get Cullen Hobeck on the show on Doomed? I love Q Into the Storm, and I think I reached out to, not to steal your thunder, Binder, but I reached out to Cullen, and I think it was in the works, but I forgot about it, or he forgot, or something like that. But
It
what about
happens. I haven't reached out to him yet. I should. That's a good idea. That's a good idea for a get. I actually still didn't. I watched a couple episodes and then bits and pieces of the other ones. I still haven't found the time to sit down and finish it. But yes, I will do just that. That's a great idea for a guest. Yeah.
They bring it home.
I haven't watched that one either. Although I did last week watch The Water, or I watched Watch the Water based on suggestion of a caller /IM. I can't recall which it was. And I want to say thank you, caller /IM. That really opened my eyes to, the dangers out there.
Illuminati kids. Greenwald might be feeling wistful for his younger days, also defending Nazis. Sounds like he's gotten a bit rusty and dropped the ball on this, though. All right, let's take a call. Calling from a 757 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
This is you.
Hi, is this me?
Yep, this is you. Who's this?
This is Jay calling from Canada. How's everyone doing?
Jay or Jake?
Jay, like the letter.
Okay, gotcha. We're doing good. How about you?
Doing all right. I've been struggling a lot with this shift that the conservative parties in both my country, Canada, and in the States have seemed to kind of move away from a lawful evil to like a chaotic evil, in that they're not even pretending to follow the rules anymore, and kind of makes me think that the lawful good kind of approach of the Democrats is insufficient, and and that we might need our leaders to be a little bit more chaotic good on their own. And so like for example, there was the non-prosecution of Manchin's daughter for whatever fraud it was that she was committing in, and there was some talk about, say, Biden using the DOJ to press charges against her, and then using that leverage to get Manchin to be willing to overturn the filibuster. And personally, I don't know, like that kind of like had two of my principles that I felt clashing against each other, but it also kind of feels like that might be, the only way to get something done with a Congress the way that it is now. So I was wondering what you guys think about that kind of situation.
I think that we do need to dispense with a lot of the stupid formalities and procedural stuff that Democrats like to lean on. I think like the perception that Republicans are going more chaotic, I think there's some truth to it. I also think it is a result of the chaos having been easier edited from the nightly news in past years. Like Iran-Contra, right? Like these are lawless freaks that we're dealing with. The problem is Biden's not going to be the guy to do this. It's like a surprise when you do get a guy that does that. Like LBJ is an interesting example of somebody who was like willing to like bring a fight and knew how to like sort of bring it through the structures. It's interesting going back to our interview where
FDR also too.
right, exactly. But like on LBJ, like our interview guest brought up bureaucracy, and one of the things LBJ did, and this is in Master of the Senate by Robert Caro, is expand the staffs of Congress people massively because they need to like what the guest said, see what's going on in the world. And this, like, if you're only confined to like 3 guys, you're not going to know anything, and you just go to business.
Yeah.
But like I think that more so than like dirty tricks or something like that, it's just unapologetic expansion of state power, especially in with the express purpose of countering private corporate capitalistic power.
So less chaotic, more aggressive, I think is how I would characterize it. But I appreciate the call, Jay. Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Have a good one. Bye. Self-aware MR, long-time listener, first-time IMR. Guys, I am curious. When was the last time you think you were totally wrong about any issue or understanding? And please don't quote Ukraine. Everyone was wrong about that. Why I ask is that my mom pointed this out when I was talking to her about some of my beliefs. She said that she has seen her students become more and more arrogant about their opinions due to political discourse with little self-awareness. To prove her wrong, can you share 2 or 3 issues that you were wrong about in recent times that you learned better later? I was wrong about Biden winning the primary. I thought he would crash and burn. Pretty wrong about that.
That's a
But
tough
what this
one.
what this IMR is saying though is not. This isn't based on anything factual though. This is all just people refusing like their beliefs. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just someone's opinion. I mean, it could be based on wrong things, but you can't really change someone's. Like, how do you prove someone's beliefs wrong? It's just what they believe. It's their opinion. They're not necessarily based in fact.
I mean, I guess it also depends on what you mean by like being wrong. Like I might misjudge individual actors' capacity to do bad or do good, but that tends to be like, you can only know someone so much. And I think that there is just also just like kind of, I don't know, it's overstated how difficult it is to be right about the vast majority of things within our country that are wrong. It's a lot of like the overarching like prescriptions that the left has for what's going wrong, at the macro level. Like, yeah, compared to neoliberalism, compared to right-wing beliefs, they are just, closer to correct than what we see right now. Are they 100% correct? Probably not. I think much to do is made about how difficult it is to be right all the time by people who find themselves under like the thumb of institutional pressure, whether stated or unstated, to toe certain lines. Like how people find it was so hard to be correct about 9/11 or whether Iraq had mass destruction. It's not like it wasn't difficult at all. Or like the coup in Bolivia, people pretending it was hard to be correct about that. You're just encouraged to like deny your senses in a way that like encourages you to deny that there's just a pattern of behavior about people in power, a pattern of behavior of people who are meant to be covering those in power, holding them account, that is very easy to determine what they will do next if you don't find yourself consistently being re-indoctrinated into believing the inherent goodness of like the elites and powerful. So I think that, when you hear people say it was difficult to be right about things in the past, I don't necessarily believe that, especially when there doesn't ever seem to be any like real grappling or self-reflection with like, okay, well, how do we be better about being right in the future? The people who are always arguing that like it was difficult to be right about 9/11 are still in the media. They're wrong all the time because they're wrong in service of the correct things. Like the only time you're not allowed to be wrong is when you're wrong in service of like giving people like access to the resources they need, and then like that hangs over your head. But being wrong is not like
being wrong in service of power is even more or like a more refined. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and go ahead, Brian.
No, I mean, just in final thought about that is just like, if people were arguing that like being wrong or being right was like the end all be all, that'd be one thing. But for the most part, I think the left argues that you should be working from like a logical standpoint that, emphasizes the material concerns and the material causes of problems, that sort of engages with why people are acting the way they are from like a structural standpoint, not just like succumbing to these like lazy right-wing narratives about like, well, some people are evil or like some people are stupid. That's why racism exists. And so like, if you find yourself wrong a lot, I think that it's fine as long as you're trying to like move towards a position where you're right more often. But a lot of times people point out that you can't be wrong all the time as an excuse to never get any better about it.
CBDNC. I used to teach Lego Mindstorms basic robotics to kids after school. Turns out Lego robotics competitions are a recruiting ground for military industrial contractors like Booz Allen Hamilton and Lockheed. Lego is cool in basically the same way Elon Musk is an innovator. Well, I mean, that last statement I think is a little broad.
Yeah. I mean, Lego has,
The Lego robotics competition doesn't sound that cool.
well, it's in the context of this sort of awful military industrial complex we've allowed to fester. But I mean, the Lego pirate stuff was cool. It's cooler than anything Elon's done.
Let's do that final Dennis Prager clip on smiling if we don't mind. So Dennis Prager, he's honestly approaching Jordan Peterson levels of despair about the left. The left is punishing us for the crime of being. This kind of, I don't know, just seeming depression about how the left is coming for them. It's completely unhinged and disconnected from reality. So much so that here's Dennis Prager saying that there are 0 happy leftists and that we are against smiling in general.
First of all, smiling annoys the left. There are no happy leftists. There are happy liberals. There are happy conservatives. But there are no happy leftists. If you're happy, you're not on the left. I've lived a long time. I've never met a happy leftist. They don't radiate happiness in public life. Think Rashid Tlaib is a happy woman? She radiate happiness to you? These people are angry people.
As opposed to me, who was very happy.
They're ingrates. Anger and ingratitude do not allow happiness.
Look at
First
that
of all,
closed off body
Who
language.
doesn't radiate happiness to me? Dennis Prager, who
These people, they don't know what happiness is. They'll never be happy. It's look at me, how happy I am all the time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm like a body language expert now because I've been watching like old episodes of MTV's The Pickup Artist, and from my perspective, Mystery would say that his body language is not happy.
Well,
he's
I have
closed off,
seen an
arm
episode of
crossed.
I've seen an episode of The Mentalist, and I would agree with you, Brandon.
Frankly, I just can't wait for him to be on The Masked Singer because this is the next thing. It's going to turn out that I don't know what the costumes are this season, so I got to assume that he's like some kind of fire hydrant on there or something.
He's the poop emoji.
It's just like funny. That's like unboxing videos. The show, they've managed to capture that level of like entertainment for children.
Also, I just noticed, we've had our run-ins with David Pakman as regards to the intellectual property of our set. The Dennis Prager, what he does with the DNP is the same thing that David Pakman does with the DNP there. So interesting.
Chain reaction. And speaking of happy, David Pakman has a happy disposition.
Oh yeah, he's a cheerful guy.
He's a cheerful guy.
He's more of a liberal though.
Yeah, but fine. Dennis Prager though, maybe he wants to have an interaction with David Pakman, and I would say I'm a fairly happy person.
Isn't it amazing though that how even on like something this unimportant, they are clearly projecting?
Yes.
Even on the happiness, how happy they are. They're projecting their feelings on someone else. I mean, everyone who he named actually seem to be very happy people. They get very angry about situations and things that happen in life. But if you follow them and watch interviews with them, they're very happy people in their own personal lives. Dennis Prager doesn't seem like that at all.
Yeah. I mean, the squad that he mentions, I've met Rashida Tlaib. She's lovely and very warm in person. All of the squad. I mean,
Ilhan seems like she has fun all the time.
Ilhan has fun all the time. She dunks on people on Twitter. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez loves to laugh and like have fun with people from back when before the pandemic when I'd interacted with her before. Like that, the examples of this is just like they're really the most miserable people I can think of are someone like Ben Shapiro.
I mean, look at somebody like Dennis Prager's friend Adam Carolla. Anybody who knows Adam Carolla would be like, you know what? Carolla's been really happy lately. He's a bitter old asshole now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the best example of what the caller from before, or rather the IMer from before, who was talking about like leftism as defined by non-leftists in the media. Like the best example of it is like the right being able to define themselves as like the party of jokes and fun. When in the times when they're not saying that, all they're doing is complaining about like people like dancing to music online, or like having a good time and drinking or something. Like they are like the mayor from Footloose, but like if their campaign was like 99% no dancing and the other 1% of the time it was like I don't know, but my opponent seems to be anti-fun. It's hilarious how they've been allowed to craft this this persona for themselves of like the party of jokers. They hate jokes. The only jokes they like are like thinly veiled bigoted jokes, because they don't even like jokes at their own expense. Like nothing makes Joe Rogan madder than when people were making jokes about him taking ivermectin and then suddenly was this is all serious.
Yeah, I need to sue CNN now.
Yeah, no, but nothing makes them like more triggered than even that video you mentioned dancing. That video of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez dancing from college, having the time of her life, like Sandy Cortez. It pisses them off.
She
They
was a
hate
bartender. That. She spent time in bars.
Those aren't fun.
Yeah,
they're not fun. And then then they write an op-ed about how no one wants to sleep with them, and like how the left is really mean because they won't hang out with them. It's like, because you guys are, I hate to say it, losers. Like you're losers.
The left is the left is too dour and serious. And now, by the way, do you see what Disney's trying to do to our kids with this representation of a gay couple? Yeah.
And here's why weed is actually a gateway drug. We're the fun ones, though.
Like, it's just a power play, because like they know that if they get to define where the joking begins and end in like media, then they're just going to inherently be inclusive of all like bigotry as like just joking, the kind of Rush Limbaugh type of joking. And then when you make a joke about how they can't get a girlfriend, they'll be like, this is serious business. Like trans people being killed, that's just like a funny haha moment online. The fact that I can't get a girlfriend, that's just that shows the left has no empathy. And you're like, okay. Oh, like, okay, yeah. Like if you take that kind of childishness seriously, it's like, okay, well, I guess.
But Dennis Prager didn't stop there. Here he is being a real fun guy. Really fun guy with a sunny disposition who we all want to be around.
Content moderation means censorship. Okay? That's what it means. There is no other explanation for the term content moderation. It's a Soviet term. Pravda would have used that. We have content moderation. It's painful for me that Max Boot has gone in this direction. I knew him. I had him on the show. He published me regularly in the Wall Street Journal when he was the opinion editor. Something happened to Max. It's very
Max Boot, like one of the most sort of like ingrate war cheerleaders of American media. And something happened to him in that sense. I don't know what happened. He doesn't want to publish Dennis Prager at the Wall Street Journal anymore.
I guess so.
Max Boot is also another great example of how being wrong, if you are high enough up in like op-ed media, does not matter. Because like I feel like every Max Boot article I've ever read that I've read a day after it's come out comes with like a correction at top, like just like a mandated correction. Like Matt Boot doesn't know anything about Iran actually, so we've removed all the paragraphs about that. And
it's very disappointing on a human level, but it's irrelevant to the larger point. Democracy, what is it? Democracy to survive needs more content moderation, not less. I shudder at these people on the left. They are the one thing I fear them more than death.
That's what I want to get to.
I am a big believer in Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death." I fear the left more than I fear death.
Be our guest.
Because everyone will die, including me. I hope later than sooner, but we all will. But what is not inevitable is the destruction of the American experiment in liberty.
You know
That
what's
is more important
yeah,
than
we're
me.
good. We're good.
You know,
You know
let's
what's fun is death talk.
all right. Let's also be straight up. Without content moderation, I'm assuming that Dennis Prager is supportive of child pornography, bestiality, suicide videos being posted, because that's the content that content moderation stops. That's literally the main type of content that gets taken down by content moderators.
Yeah, what about just nudity, like boobs and stuff? Like why? Like this is the if that's censorship, then it's censorship. And I agree that like there's certain things that you should censor and certain things you don't. They want to keep the like Nazi talk and get rid of nudity. And I would probably err in the other direction on what I would content moderate or censor.
Well, you know, I would say I think they would argue that they're using content as like they're using it as like in scare quotes to just be like that's what they'll call it, content moderation, but we know it's like speech. But from my perspective, this really just gets at to the heart of what cancel culture is really about and what all of these like complaints are actually about, which is the idea that like they might come into some kind of difficulties if we started taking like hate speech seriously, or we started like enforcing the terms of services for these third-party accounts that would prevent them from making content, which is monetized speech, which is different from free speech. And because we live in a very heavily, neoliberal society, where everything is commodified, the collapsing or the reduction of like all free speech or all activity, that the government says is okay in the Constitution inherently being, subject and allowable to monetize is something that people should just take for granted. And because this conversation is happening online, where the population having it is just overrepresented, or rather overrepresentative of like content creators, in the people who most in the people who most regularly consume content, it's just being had by the most biased people who just inherently believe that like the right to make money off of speech is inherently the same as it being free. The people who think that like, it's the same to want to say the N-word as a white person in my private home with my friends as it is to make it the central joke of my Netflix special that I want people to consume and buy. And it's just like, it's just not. But when you're talking to like a very heavily biased population, biased towards this idea that creation and consumption of online content is like, something to derive a very big positive social feeling from, or just, your job, then it's easy to convince yourself that those two things are one-to-one, but they're just not. The right to make a joke is not the same thing as the right to be a paid comedian, but they get treated like it is by people who want you to confuse them for one another.
Yep. All right, let's take another call. Calling from an 850 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Maddie Washburn calling from coastal Oregon. How are y'all doing today?
Doing well, Maddie. What's on your mind?
So I called in a couple months ago and talked to you all about how my father is a right-wing talk show host, and like how that impacted my media literacy going forward and everything along those lines.
Yes.
And so something that I didn't discuss on that call just because I don't think it was relevant at the time, but I did discuss with Matt Leck afterwards because of the titling of the video clip, is that in the past year, I have recently come out as non-binary. And sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, just the first of all, I want to say, thank you to all of y'all for all of the coverage that y'all have been doing about LGBT issues and everything. It's been great to have you all, be there as allies and comrades in that fight. It's been incredibly scary the past couple months, to say the least. So when I came out, it was during the pandemic. I was in quarantine and everything. There wasn't a lot of social interaction and stuff like that. And as societies move back towards being normal again, air quotes around normal, because what the hell is going on? It's gotten, a bit more, difficult, and like, I started a new job. Nobody there knows that I'm non-binary or anything. And I can't talk about it, with anyone. And so with that on top of all of this stuff that's been going on in the news lately, it's just been an incredibly overwhelming time. But the Libs of TikTok story that just came out, kind of like clicked something with me that I just felt like I needed to talk about. So
You're doing great. You're doing great.
yeah, I'm sure like, my experience is probably not, I guess, the norm for most people. But I just wanted to share kind of part of that, so folks will know what it's like for the people who are impacted by what's going on right now. Like, I'm fucking 30. I'm turning 31 years old this year, and like, I did not get this part of me figured out until recently, because of everything. And I was growing up, like I said, with a right-wing talk show host as a father. He's now running for governor of fucking Arkansas in a primary against Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Jesus Christ. If you're in Arkansas, please don't let that man win. If you're listening right now in Arkansas, just do not let this man become your governor, please. He's going to hurt people. But growing up, there was a large stigma placed around not just LGBT issues, but also just sex in general. And it led to, because, the religious background and everything, it led to a lot of confusion growing up, which ended up leading into a lot of sneaking around to try to explore and figure things out, never necessarily doing so. And that always came with just a form of shame and guilt. And for a large amount of my childhood, I was suicidal. And this is what kids are dealing with right now. That exploration without guidance leads to wanting to just kill yourself a lot of the time, or even just like, exploring and ending up hurting yourself in ways. Like, I look back at some of that stuff and I'm just like, wow, I could have like incredibly like mangled myself doing this, that, and the other, things that I'm not going to get too deep into because of just how personal it is. But it's fucking terrifying. And I just, every fucking day, I wake up and I think about just all of these kids that are going through this right now. And I don't give a fuck what Glenn Greenwald has to say, or any other person who wants to put their LGBT bona fides out front and be like, I'm defending this Libs of TikTok account with my, LGBT identity. Fuck you. Go straight to fucking hell. Like, it is just incredibly disheartening. There are so many people just fucking hurting right now, and children hurting, and children who are going to be hurt, and children who are going to kill themselves over all of this. And people do not care. People are more concerned that we know this, real estate investor's name now. Like, get over it. Like, there's legitimate evil going on here, and
I mean, look, Maddie, thank you so much for sharing. And I know it's difficult. I appreciate you calling back and talking about your experience in particular. One, because your experience with your father is unique in terms of his public profile, but not unique in terms of the bigotry that non-binary, queer kids, trans kids face from their parents who have a similar perspective, if not as virulent, given his public stature, I guess. But this is the point here too. Also, I mean, I think it's important to point out that this Libs of TikTok person is a religious conservative in her own right, and this is just another brand, seemingly based on the reporting and looking into her background. This is religious theocracy and suppression. And the Libs of TikTok account was a media branch of that was targeting regular people. And as Binder pointed out previously, it wasn't just teachers, it was also kids. The kids that you mentioned who struggled with many, I would imagine, of the same feelings that you had growing up.
Exactly. I mean, it's ridiculous that there's all these people trying to act as if, you know, this isn't some political actor and that we shouldn't know who it is. When we've got the everything with like the Ron DeSantis' people saying that they helped to inform the Don't Say Gay bill. You know, that this is like. I don't know how you can want transparency in your politics and then act as if keeping this person's identity a secret is you know, something that needs to be done. Like it's they're hurting people, they're hurting children, they're who cannot help themselves, and they're trying to make sure that they don't have a route to find help or answers to this confusion, right? Like going explicitly after teachers who are trying to, you know, give them some sort of a safe space, some sort of guidance in the absence of that at home. And it just fucking sucks. I mean, I was going to college. I returned to college a couple years ago, hoping to like get a degree and start teaching, and stuff with that's been kind of goofed up a little bit. But like, you know, with everything that's going on right now, it makes me scared to like even try to finish it and go down that route, because then all of a sudden, you know, a parent or somebody finds out I'm non-binary, and then all of a sudden it's just like, well, sunk all that time and money and I'm out of the career, and I can't, you know, help the people that I was explicitly like going into the field to help or anything. And it's hurting people now. It's demotivating people from like being helpful in the future, and it just sucks so fucking bad. And I just want to thank you all so much for, you know, doing what you're doing and raising awareness on all of this, because it's just incredibly difficult right now.
Well, Maddie, thank you so much for calling back in, and feel free to call in again and give us an update. I really appreciate your vulnerability and your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for calling in.
No problem, y'all. Thanks for letting me talk. And before I go, happy birthday, Bender Dad.
Yes, exactly. All right, thank you, Maddie.
Thank you. You know, I just want to say that
have a good one.
You too.
People like Maddie are the reason why this stuff matters. Like, I know it's easy for people to hear a Twitter account called Libs of TikTok. Why should I care about this? This sounds very online. I mean, that's a very like early 2010s way of thinking of these things. Like, these are the accounts that literally move the discourse in whatever direction they choose to. I mean, I mentioned earlier just how influential this specific account alone has been, with boasting about direct lines to the Texas AG, the Ron DeSantis' press secretary, a huge fan of this account. I mean, it couldn't be more clear that this person who runs this Twitter account is hugely influential on what's going on in the real world. And when that happens, it affects the lives of people like Maddie, and people who are even in a more a worse position. Imagine being a teen, like how Maddie was talking about how he only felt comfortable, later on in life coming out. Imagine if, as hard as it was for him as a teen, with people in your real life, imagine hundreds, if not thousands of people coming at you, attacking you because you're LGBTQ in this day and age, and being 13, 14, 15. It would be, you can't imagine it. You can't imagine it.
I mean, I think that it's it's just despicable. It's despicable that like not only do we have to live in a world where like people are very actively, proud of their bigotry and trying to coerce people into spreading it online through various through various like tricks and platforms, but also that at the root, or rather in defense of a lot of these people who are just content creators trying to either earn clout or money from like spreading hate, people are allowed to abstract this to be something other than that, which is like the attempt to spread hatred for money and or fame, to be somehow deeply intertwined with the rights of the people that they're actually advocating the extermination of. Like, if we don't allow for the content to be made or the content to be platformed on private channels and public channels, whatever, of like people's right to advocate for the destruction of vulnerable populations, then it's somehow going to result in the destruction of those vulnerable populations even faster or even like more violently. And again, it's unfortunate that the conversation about free speech and about like the effects of what media and these kinds of echo chambers do to our population are just inherently had by people who make their money or make their sort of like, or rather who derive their positive social characteristics from being entrenched in that world as like content creators, because we just can't have a legitimate conversation about what it means to have a media system that's just so full of propaganda, so full of like lies and misinformation, and it just becomes like an economy of abstract hatred and abstracted content and free speech only as the right to monetize your speech, not the right to like just be a private citizen who wants to learn about their sexuality, or who wants to pursue their life in a way that's outside of the purview of like right-wing Christian racism or xenophobia. Like no one has those rights, but if you want to like post hatred online, those are the most important free speech arguments. Sorry to go on there for a little bit. It's very upsetting. People think it's cool to be a bigot now. People think it's like it's fucking cool to like post hatred
it's
online.
edgelordy. Yeah.
And then they get mad when people offline don't like it because they've been like convinced that the entire world works by like early 2007 4chan like forum rules. And so when they go to their job and they make a big fit at the EEO conference that everyone there hates them, then they run back to like the Libs of TikTok account for like a boost and like go fund me. Turns out there are a lot of LGBTQ people at my job who don't like that.
Yeah.
Well, I can confirm too that people have used Libs of TikTok, like conservatives and like conservative parents around the country have used Libs of TikTok as their own personal way of like settling vendettas against people at schools that their kids go to or in their county. Because I found Facebook posts of conservative, like local conservative parent activists boasting about how, yes, got another hit in Libs of TikTok. They posted information about this county school that I sent them.
It's a internet clout bounty system, which results in, I mean, we saw this is an odd connection to make, but we talk about all the people wrongly imprisoned in Guantanamo were rounded up by the United States government because they had we set up bounty systems, and the neighbors had personal vendettas against somebody else. I don't like this person, I'm gonna report them. I mean, it's just that's what you do. That's what happens when you set up that kind of you try to turn communities on one another in that way and set up that incentive structure.
It also relies on the kind of carte blanche that the mainstream media and that a lot of just like other content creators, because they don't want to take responsibility in some way for what they put out, allow for right wingers to just be, totally distance themselves from the actions or the beliefs of their audience in a way that just does not make any sense. And like we can have an audience that's like 99% or like 51% like clearly just like far right trolls and be like, well, there's nothing about my content that would lead people to people to believe that I'm far right.
Yeah.
It's like they just came here by magic. They're just magically here, and it's a level of just like complete intellectual dishonesty that we provide to these people that is just like it prevents any kind of real interrogation of what's going on and who's responsible like functionally.
Yeah.
Because they're allowed to just frame themselves as just like a passive actor who's reposting. I don't not live with TikTok specifically, but everyone is just like a passive actor in this machine that is reposting videos or who's just like boosting or elevating stuff, but no one's responsible for their audience. But they can, when they get outed by someone who's taken personal offense, like, or when Alex Jones gets sued by the families of the Sandy Hook victims, whoever is doing the outing or whoever is like calling the job to get them fired or whoever is like lobbing the lawsuit, the far right's able to frame them not as just like a person that they've aggrieved on a personal level, but like they're just an illiberal part of the left-wing machine.
Yeah.
It's not because I spread hate online that people have been attracted to that and that this is just my fan base of people who spread hate. It's just it's just a left-wing conspiracy to take me down personally.
Yeah, it really is the word despicable is right. Like, and what Maddie said about like these folks that are trying to cultivate and harvest sympathy for this Libs of TikTok person in the broader context of this just attack on gay and non-binary people. It really is despicable.
It's stochastic terrorism.
Yeah. And stochastic provoking of suicides.
Yeah. A squared. To the last caller out there, thank you for their courage, I would say. I think we should use they them pronouns. Emma, you're right. In the end, the Republicans want LGBTQ people to die by isolating them, shaming them. If they don't want to be heteronormative, so be it. They don't care if they kill themselves. We will sadly see Oberd. There's a tip. I think there's a typo here. Reversed by the court soon, and I'm afraid of more backlash and hatred. Thanks, Brandon and Mats, for your comments on this today. Fabucat, please clip Maddie's piece. The gay marriage decision. Yes, Bradley. But I was blanking on the name of it, and I don't think the way it was spelled was correct. But maybe I'm wrong. Fabucat, please clip Maddie's call and place it up on YouTube. Also tell Maddie that they should become a teacher in a more accepting jurisdiction. That might be difficult. Wyoming Ryan, great caller. This is why I love the show. Do you think Republicans would be so high on abortion if they knew the fetus was going to transition later on? Haha. Truck Nuts 420. I messaged this week suggesting watch Water. So glad Brandon watched it. Definitely seems like his sense of humor. Perchance, where did Brandon find it? So far, I've only found it via Rumble, which makes me grumble. Ha. Happy birthday, Bender Dad. Many happy returns. Where did you find it, Brandon?
I also watched it on Rumble, the right-wing.
It's on Rumble.
Right-wing YouTube / fight and screw site that they set up to, to like be exiled to when YouTube won't let them post conspiracies. I will say, like, I liked Watch the Water. As somebody who watches a lot of conspiracy theory videos, I like the energy the guy brought to it. I like the ideas in it. They're crazy, but like in a way that's like new, like Catholic snake Pope venom, but also Chinese somehow. I think
Are you talking about Stu Peters?
Stu Peters is a whole different animal. No pun intended. I'm talking about the doctor of chiropractic. I forget what his name is. Something artist, something like that. Who fully admits to not knowing much about medicine or snakes multiple times in the documentary, and I'm like, okay. And it's true. He knows less about snakes from his 4 weeks of reading about snakes than I learned about snakes from watching Naked and Afraid. But like, as somebody who like listens to a lot of conspiracies, I don't think this one's going to catch on. I don't think it has legs. Again, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Because good conspiracies, even right-wing ones, rely on like being able to look around you and be like, that sort of makes sense. And when they did the follow-up video to like for him to like answer some questions from the audience about like the snake venom thing, like everyone was like, okay, but don't like animals drink the water? How come animals aren't infected with the venom? He didn't really have a good answer for that. They asked about like why kids don't have as many symptoms from COVID, and like he was like, kids are actually less susceptible to snake venom, which does not seem true. And so I think that, you know, people might think conspiracy theorists are willing to believe everything, but like when simple questions like that can't be answered with like, oh yeah, but you know, like the government, you know, that I think that you find yourself oftentimes just not quite getting a lot of like listeners. Also, I would say that he really heavily emphasizes how he's on a personal mission from God to like spread this information, which is you know.
Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. No happy leftists. I bet Dennis Prager wouldn't wear a Thanos tank top. I agree. I would not want to see that either. Kid tested Politburo approved. I think this is a cry for help from Prager. He's clearly a leftist undercover, in too deep.
I mean, he's right. PragerU's videos are funny, but not like in the way he intends.
Yes. Emma's gambling addiction. Was that David Feldman or Dennis Prager? Big MR fan. A few questions for Matt Binder. Matt, did you watch the entire Netflix series Cuties with your family?
Oh, you saw this? Let's do this. All right. I don't think you realize this person's not a MR fan. But we could do this. Let's do it. A few questions.
Here,
I can read it. I see it. Okay, go ahead.
You see it? Oh,
yeah, go ahead then.
I didn't. Yeah, okay. You were one of the only progressive voices who gave a full-throated defense of that controversial show that blatantly sexualized prepubescent children under the veil of quote-unquote satire. Do you still stand by this defense? Would you still allow your own daughter to be in this kind of show as you would in 2020? Depending on how you answer, you may not be the best progressive representative to push back against grooming accusations. So this person's a right-winger, yeah.
Yeah, but I could easily. Matt, did you watch the entire Netflix series Cuties with your family? I actually watched it with my partner, and also I should tell you that it's not a series. You should probably watch the movie you're talking about before you act like you know what's in a movie. It's not a series. You were one of the only progressive voices who gave a full-throated defense of that controversial show that blatantly sexualized prepubescent children under the veil of quote-unquote satire. No one defended that show under the veil of satire. It's not a comedy. It's a very serious movie about a very serious thing. It's about what a young Muslim teen girl, preteen, I believe, goes through as she grows up when, you know, she's trying to live in both worlds of her very religious family, and then her friends at school who are into like, you know, dancing and stuff like that. So it's not satire. Again, you should probably watch a movie or show or whatever you think it is before you know what you're talking about. So do I still stand by this defense? More than ever, because I have once again a million times been proven right. Because you can look at that as one of the earliest examples of what we're currently living in what we're seeing in Florida, in Texas, with the Libs of TikTok account.
That's why Ted Cruz tweeted it out.
Yes.
What? So wait, this was that French movie about like 13-year-old girls?
I have never been more vindicated, aside from maybe QAnon, Gamergate. I could go on, by the way. Will you still allow your own daughter to be in this kind of show as you said you would in 2020? I would if she was if she had the mindset where she understood the material in the script. Because guess what? Your children are people. They have agency. I'm not one of those dads who's going to wear a shirt that says, "Ask me if you could date my daughter." That's none of my business. I'll watch out for my daughter, make sure she's protected and taken care of. But she's a big girl when she gets to be of the age where she can date. And when she decides and who she decides to date is on her. Yeah. Give me a break.
I would.
Depending on how you answer, you may not be the best progressive representative to push back against grooming accusations, buddy. You're a fascist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to say I think Binder is exactly who should be responding to that. And I haven't seen Cuties, but I do have basic pattern recognition, and I think Binder is absolutely right in his assessment of that whole thing. And I think anybody who wants, I mean, I agree that that person is probably a fascist. If anybody is on the left and subscribes to that, you're fucking lost.
I'm gonna watch this tonight. Like, who led this campaign against this movie? It seems well reviewed. It seems interesting. It seems like a good look into like a coming of age movie. It was Tulsi.
Tulsi got in on
yeah,
it, I'm
Jesus
sure.
Christ.
But Ted Cruz, I know, tweeted about it. Yeah, there's just it was exactly.
Speaking of Tulsi, before we go, we got to do this clip of her. I think we got to do this clip, and we got to keep it like fairly brief, guys. But let's do this, Tulsi. I'm sorry to cut you off, Matt, but I just
No,
we haven't done enough videos today. I feel like which number is that? Bradley. Okay, number 7 here.
Okay, got it.
All right. Here's Tulsi Gabbard in the vein of, talking about right-wingers who are pushing this grooming narrative on Sean Hannity's show as she speaks about this, quote, parental rights legislation, the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. She's just a straight-up right-winger now, but this is instructive to see. She's adopted pretty much all of the right-wing's talking points about this, and it's good to see how the critical race theory nonsense, the parental rights when it comes to masking, the grooming rhetoric coming out about anti-trans and anti-gay rhetoric coming out of the right, it all comes from the same tree. They're all branches from the same tree.
Whether it's this issue or it's critical race theory or education or other things, what we're seeing is the government increasingly encroaching on this relationship, driving a wedge between parents and their kids and taking away parents' rights one by one.
If I'm hearing you correctly, I hear that you support the bill in Florida, the parents' rights bill. And this idea, I'm not exactly sure where this imperative came from to teach kindergartners and first and second and third graders about sexuality at all or transgenderism at all. And it seems that you take a sensible point of view, that you support the parents' rights to raise their kids the way they see fit. I agree with you, but I think you are at great odds with your own party on this. But I think you're in the majority with the American people. So how does that impact the election?
Yeah, Sean, I'm not a political pundit, but I can say very clearly, yes, I support that bill that passed in Florida. And I think, frankly, it probably didn't go far enough. It's stopping at third grade. It should have, frankly, gone farther. But this is not a partisan issue. This is about challenging, I don't know, 12th grade? How do you determine this?
While kids are...
Exactly.
Let the parents take care of it. Now, schools can offer after-school opt-in sexuality classes if they want, and parents can opt in if they're uncomfortable, right? Would that be fair?
I think that's fair, but look at education. I think you're going to the core point here is what is the role of government?
Right,
what is the role of the...
All right, we get it. So your own party, first of all, like, we get it. You're basically Dave Rubin. You are paid, and like your role and what you want to do with the rest of your career is to pretend that you represent some more reasonable section of the liberals and the Democratic Party, when in fact all that you represent at this point are right-wing talking points, including this parental rights nonsense, which is really just a way to make sure that kids are kept in the closet and are hating themselves and are unable to express themselves at school. It gives rights to right-wing, theocratic, fundamentalist, religious parents who want their children to repress themselves and not be able to have an outlet in their community environment in schools where they might be able to might be presented with a healthier perspective on who they can be, so they aren't suicidal and don't despise themselves. And this is a through line throughout her career. We played part of that clip before on the show, but this is the fuller context. This is she was anti-gay and then tried to cover it up when she ran for president back when she was in the Hawaii state legislature. She came from a damn cult that was also homophobic, and this has been something that she has been impassioned about her entire career. So now she's just parlayed that into like this new niche where she's eventually going to defect from the Democratic Party, say, I left the left. It's the same grift as Dave Rubin. It's the same grift as Glenn Greenwald. And she's using her platform in order to make sure that children are in a position where they are more likely to harm themselves or feel or are prone to depression, because we understand this. Trans kids, gay kids have higher suicide rates, higher rates of depression, and it's directly because of this kind of rhetoric. So, I mean, it's despicable.
I want to read this quote from her again. The government is trying to intimidate parents, threatening to take their children away unless they go along with the woke agenda. Is she seriously saying this just weeks after the governor of Texas had a directive for Child Protective Services to investigate parents for child abuse if they had a trans teen? I mean, are you serious? Yeah. Literally, Texas wanted to rip trans children, trans teenagers away from their loving parents who actually do accept them, for viewing them as who they are. And that's what they wanted to do in Texas. And Tulsi Gabbard's ass is out here saying the opposite. Give me a break.
I mean, I don't want to be the one to play devil's advocate today, but I think we've heard the anti side, but I think, frankly, no one's speaking in defense of Republicans like Roy Moore, who will have a much more difficult dating life if we teach children that pedophilia is wrong. And so, we gotta really cool it on only telling one side of the story. On one, you're thinking about the children who would be saved from abuse and all other shit, but what about like the abusers?
We have to teach both sides of pedophilia. There's the pro-pedophilia side and the anti.
That's why no one likes the left. They don't like jokes. They don't like pedophiles.
But that's what Matt has been saying this a lot, and it's such a good point of emphasis. Teaching kids about sex and their bodies prevents kids from getting preyed upon. This is important. And really, the other side of this is that they want teachers to be under constant threat. They want to weed out teachers who might say racism is bad, who might say I'm gay. They want to make sure that they are constantly undercut and afraid. And that is another part of what all of this, activization, they're trying to activate the base on the grassroots level to go after teachers. And then it also helps the Republican Party in general, because if you're activated at your school board meetings, unmask my kids, this gay teacher is wrong, this trans teacher is wrong, this teacher talking about racism is wrong, you're much more likely to vote for Republicans as well. And you weed out those teachers who might be teaching kids about different perspectives, so those kids are in their mind more likely to be good soldiers in the culture war, as opposed to being a part of the woke left.
It's also, at some point, it's a lot. What they're drawing on is a lot of just like, the fact this country has a lot of secularized puritanical dogma just still instilled in people, even though we pretend like we aren't like a Christian nation. And so many people are just really, really ready and willing to believe that, simply having knowledge of sex or sexuality or sexual orientation somehow makes their child less pure, that it's just the knowledge of it that like is inherently corrupting, as opposed to all the adults otherwise, I hate to say it, in the Republican Party, who are trying to prey on them through like personal and structural means. It's like, so, keeping kids in the dark just becomes a way to continually enforce a level of like Christian dogma onto our society that enforces like, well, no. Sex is something that we don't talk about. It's something that, it's not for polite conversation. And there's no like real scientific or like practical reason why they have to find one. And it's really just an appeal to like the emotions of parents who are still remembering, their upbringing as in a puritanical, neurotic society. But there's no like practical purpose for like keeping it away from kids, because like it makes them safer.
All right, guys, we gotta wrap, because this is a day I have a doctor's appointment. It's the day I decided to go longer. Queenie Bobini, my parents have been staunch conservatives my whole life, but despite this, they were coming around on trans people before this 2022 groomer discourse, and have been slowly more and more tolerant of queer people as a whole. It's so disappointing watching all that progress disappear because of cretins like Tucker Carlson and libs of TikTok. I don't know how to counter these talking points and bring them back to where they were before. says Queenie Bobini. Yeah, I hear you. 3 more. Matt Lex, knockoff Legos. Legos were better before the branded IP sets. Remember when your choices were pirate, spaceman, or race car driver?
Oh
But
man,
yeah,
those were so good.
now it's just like Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
I will say, if you know of any like do-it-yourself like Lego construction kits that like people share online, because I'm sure that people have like put like the building material list and like the steps on like Reddit or whatever for like cooler stuff. Let me know because they don't make anime ones, and I'm all about that.
Sam Cedar writes in, great show today. You all need raise and paid time off. Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
I'll hold you to your word, and I'm assuming it's gotta be you. No one would fake being Sam.
I don't think it goes far enough. Working itself is oppressive.
I agree. And the final I am of the day, Bourbon Socialist. I'm guessing these conservatives aren't opposed to teaching kids the difference between Miss and Mrs. in kindergarten. Great point. Because most people aren't completely obstinate and understand that children can comprehend the concept of marriage. The policy is such blatant attack on LGBT people. They want kids who may be LGBT to remain in the closet or otherwise face an environment of bigotry. And furthermore, they want to encourage an environment where stray kids will bully and isolate kids that may be LGBT. We played a clip of a Texas candidate saying it sucks that my kids can't bully trans and gay kids anymore. So yes, thank you, Bourbon Socialist.
The important thing is that the concerns of libs of TikTok and their fans are bullshit, bigoted. That's all you need to know.
All right, guys, great show. I really do have to run now. Make it to this appointment. Thanks so much. Peace.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth